Happy Monday, folks. Thank you for watching us, and thank you for tuning in here on Live Impact News on WCNC Plus. I'm Nick Sturdivant. Carlene Bragg is sitting right across from me.
We made it. We're back.
We made it. We're back to Monday.
Yeah,
I saw Carlene briefly on Friday.
Yep.
And then that was it. I had to go home. I wasn't feeling well, guys. So
he's back.
I'm back. You know, I think what it is that weird time of year when we have pollen, which pollen levels are not super high right now, but you have a combination of pollen in the spring, and then the weather just jumps all over the place. So I was telling Carlene as we were starting the show, it feels amazing outside. It's a lot cooler. I had a fleece on and I was walking comfortably.
It was chilly this morning.
Last week, it was in the 80s.
Yeah.
So the temperature flip-flopping, and then
it did something to you.
It did something to me. So, you know, hey, it is what it is. But it feels amazing outside. A great day to go walk a dog named Turkey.
That's right.
To walk a turkey.
Walk a turkey.
Outside, wherever you are. Do we want to go check weather first, or do we want to head to something?
To the measles.
Okay. We were going to check on weather, but let's head to this. This is important. So the largest measles outbreak in the U.S. in decades has ended. That's according to South Carolina officials. So we're hearing from the South Carolina Department of Health. Let's take a listen in this press conference, which just started a few minutes ago.
Over this period compared to the year prior. In particular, January and February were record months for MMR vaccination in the state. Ending this outbreak was a monumental effort for DPH, our partners in the upstate, and the CDC. We are even now studying the impacts of it and hope to share several findings in the months to come. As the largest recorded outbreak of measles since 1991 in the country, there are many lessons to be learned and to share. We have several staff transitioning from working on controlling the outbreak to learning from our data and our experience. The outbreak is over, but our work to understand and prevent measles and future outbreaks is not. A thorough after-action review and analysis is being started. We believe our outbreak response team did a tremendous job under really in unprecedented conditions, but there are always things that we can learn from and improve on in our future with future responses, and we are committed to doing so. DPH remains focused on preventing future outbreaks of vaccine-preventable diseases. We remain very vigilant for any imported measles cases and continue our readiness to respond. As a reminder, although the outbreak here in the upstate is over, we still ask that providers report suspect cases of measles to DPH's epidemiology team at the time they send that specimen for testing, and that laboratories are also required to urgently report positive results at a minimum. A health alert that will go out today details additional surveillance points for providers and those that work in healthcare. And finally, I want to state that DPH is returning to its pre-outbreak vaccination recommendations, meaning that the early dose of MMR vaccine for 6 to 11-month-old infants is only recommended prior to travel internationally or to an area with an outbreak actively occurring, but is not routinely recommended for that age group at this time. More than 5,800 infants received this early dose, which was an effort that was undoubtedly instrumental in protecting some of those most vulnerable children for this virus. As a reminder, those children, though, still do need 2 doses, an additional 2 doses of MMR that are both given after their first birthday for the full lifelong protection.
All right, so that is the measles press conference. We want to head over to the White House right now. This is Caroline Leavitt, press secretary for the White House. Let's take a listen in.
Trump individual who traveled across the country to assassinate the president and as many administration officials as possible. This is the 3rd major assassination attempt against President Trump in 2 years. No other president in history has faced such repeated, serious attempts on his life. First and foremost, the President, the First Lady, and everyone in this White House are extraordinarily grateful to the brave law enforcement professionals who sprang into action to apprehend the would-be assassin and keep all of us safe. The President would especially like to express his gratitude to the men and women of the United States Secret Service who acted with the utmost professionalism, courage, and sense of duty. This includes the heroic agent who took a bullet to the chest. Thankfully, he was saved by his bulletproof vest. Minutes after returning here to the White House to the Oval Office, despite fighting Secret Service to try to stay and keep the dinner going on Saturday, ahead of addressing you here in the briefing room, President Trump was intent on speaking to this brave agent to ensure he was okay, and the agent assured the president that he was. As you know, I was seated next to President Trump and the First Lady when the shots were fired before Secret Service swiftly moved us to safety backstage. The president's calm in the face of chaos, while yet another individual was trying to take his life, was really remarkable to witness, and it's something I will never forget. President Trump is fearless because he loves this country, and he is willing to put his own life on the line to deliver on the promises that he made to the American public who elected him here into the highest office in the land. And while we are blessed to have a fearless president, we should not live in a country where such constant fear of political violence permeates our society every single day. We can and we should have fierce disagreement in this country. As you all know, we disagree often, myself in this role and all of you in the news media. But those disagreements must remain peaceful. Debating, peaceful protesting, and voting are how we need to settle disagreements, not bullets. Nobody in recent years has faced more bullets and more violence than President Trump. This political violence stems from a systemic demonization of him and his supporters by commentators, yes, by elected members of the Democrat Party, and even some in the media. This hateful and constant and violent rhetoric directed at President Trump day after day after day for 11 years has helped to legitimize this violence and bring us to this dark moment. Those who constantly falsely label and slander the president as a fascist, as a threat to democracy, and compare him to Hitler to score political points are fueling this kind of violence. The left-wing cult of hatred against the president and all of those who support him and work for him has gotten multiple people hurt and killed, and it almost did so again this weekend. When you read the manifesto of this shooter, ask yourselves, how different is the rhetoric from this almost assassin than what you read on social media and hear in various forums every single day? The answer, if you're being honest with yourself, is that there is no difference at all. Much of the manifesto of the would-be assassin is indistinguishable from the words that we hear daily from so many. For example, as the First Lady of the United States pointed out this morning, just 2 days prior to the shooting, ABC's late-night host Jimmy Kimmel disgustingly called First Lady Melania Trump an expectant widow. Who in their right minds says a wife would be glowing over the potential murder of her beloved husband? And having experienced what I did with the First Lady on Saturday night, I can tell you that she was anything but that. This kind of rhetoric about the president, the First Lady, and his supporters is completely deranged, and it's unbelievable that the American people are consuming it night after night after night. As President Trump said on Saturday night at this podium, we as Americans must recommit ourselves to resolving our differences peacefully and uniting around the shared values that make our country great. The deranged lies and smears against the president, his family, his supporters have led crazy people to believe crazy things, and they are inspired to commit violence because of those words. It has to stop. And one more point. Saturday night served as yet another reminder of how important it is to fund the Department of Homeland Security. It is shameful that the United States Congress has kept this vital agency defunded for 73 days, the longest shutdown of a federal agency in U.S. history. The Secret Service is a vital component of DHS. It has been directly impacted by this reckless political gamesmanship. Everyone in this room who was there on Saturday night witnessed the heroes of Secret Service and federal law enforcement jump into action in the face of grave danger and uncertainty. Agents put their own lives in harm's way to protect the president, the First Lady, the Vice President, and members of the cabinet. One agent can be seen in video footage literally jumping onto the stage, not knowing where the attacker was or where the bullets were coming from at that point, to place his body in front of the President of the United States. These men and women are heroes. They perform their duties daily, and they have children and families too. And they do it despite the political turmoil surrounding their agency. Make no mistake, this defunding of DHS should be a national scandal. If Republicans defunded DHS and we saw in another attempted assassination on a Democrat president, I would hope that the media coverage would be relentless and unforgiving, and I hope that it continues to be now. With the World Cup, America 250, the 2028 Olympics, and a presidential election all ahead, the Democrats' obstruction is placing an enormous and totally pointless burden on the Secret Service that can get more people killed. Enough is enough. There should be no further debate about this. Democrats need to do what President Trump has been calling on them to do for 73 days in a row and fund the Department of Homeland Security, period. This is a national emergency, and every member of Congress needs to put their country over party and get the Department of Homeland Security funded. With that, I will take a few of your questions today. Daniel, thank you for being here. Why don't you kick us off?
Thank you, Caroline. The president, Saturday after the assassination attempt, came here. He emphasized that law enforcement did their job, keeping everyone safe at the dinner. House Speaker Mike Johnson came out and said he believes the president needs greater protection. What is the White House's message to the millions of Americans who wake up here today nervous, uneasy about the safety of the president at events like this and the safety of other cabinet members?
Well, we certainly understand their fears and their worries. As you heard from the president himself, he continues to have trust in the United States Secret Service. As I just said, these are great men and women who are doing their jobs and performing their duties honorably. As we all witnessed on Saturday evening, within minutes, the president, the first lady, the vice president, members of the president's cabinet were ushered out of the room. The perpetrator who sought to inflict massive harm, as we all now know with the release of the manifesto on administration officials and the president himself, was stopped at the security perimeter that was set up. He tried to charge through it, as you saw on video, and he was quickly neutralized by Secret Service, and thank God that he was. With that said, obviously the White House is always asking the tough questions and ensuring the safety of the president. I understand there will be a meeting early this week convened by the White House Chief of Staff Susie Wiles with top DHS leadership, members of the United States Secret Service, and our own operations team here to ensure the safety and the security of the president, as we do have many of these major events moving forward. So we're always monitoring operations and procedures, always asking the tough questions to ensure the president is safe, and the American people should be assured there's no higher priority for the president and his staff than the president's safety.
Caroline, Friday you said that you thought that gaggle out of the sticks would be your last one before your baby. Back in 2024, when the president had the attempt on his life in Butler, you cut your maternity leave short back then. You're obviously back here today after Saturday. Can you just elaborate a little bit why you felt it was important to be here to brief the media and talk to the American people from the stand?
Sure. It's sort of crazy timing when you put it that way for both children with 2 assassination attempts against the president. I'm honored to work in this job. I view this job as the president's spokesperson and the White House spokeswoman as public service. It's not just any job. I'm honored to do it, and I'm honored to work and speak on behalf of President Trump, who has faced unprecedented adversity and challenges, and I'm honored to work for him. And again, as I witnessed on Saturday night, just his dogged resolve and determination to get back onto the stage, and he was pushing Secret Service and law enforcement to allow him to address, and that really, I think, hopefully gives the country the type of strength that we need. And I certainly know, as his spokeswoman, and I can speak on behalf of all of the staff here at the White House, the president inspires all of us to just keep going and keep fighting every day.
Thanks, Caroline.
Thanks, Daniel, and congrats to you on your new baby. He's beautiful. Aisha.
Just on the rhetoric, you mentioned the First Lady and Jimmy Kimmel. Jimmy Kimmel's comments were, "Mrs. Trump, you have a glow like an expectant widow." And he said this days before the shooting, but there does seem to be a normalization of rhetoric about assassinating this particular president. How can this administration try to put an end to this?
Well, I think you heard it directly from the president on Saturday night, Aisha, that in his words, we need to recommit ourselves as a country to toning down the rhetoric and to unifying around what makes our country great. That's true of everyone who works in this White House, but as I said, it's also true of everyone who has a voice and a platform across this country, whether you're on television, a podcast host, people listen, and when you have mentally disturbed individuals across the country who are listening to this crazed rhetoric about the president day after day after day, it inspires them to do crazy things. And unfortunately, it's not just the media, it is the entire Democrat Party has made their pitch to voters across the country that Donald Trump poses an existential threat to democracy, that he is a fascist, and that they compare him to Hitler. I mean, these are despicable statements that the American people have been consuming for years, and so many mentally perturbed individuals are led to believe these words are truth and then are inspired to act on it. I have a whole host of examples that we can share with you after. It is pages and pages of major Democrat Party elected officials saying, such as Rep. Hakeem Jeffries just this month said, "We are in an era of maximum warfare everywhere all the time." Governor Josh Shapiro said heads need to roll within the administration. Senator Alex Padilla said people are, quote, dying because of fear and terror caused by the Trump administration. Senator Elizabeth Warren, President Trump is making the country look like a, quote, fascist state. Senator Adam Schiff saying President Trump using a dictator playbook. Senator Ed Markey calling President Trump a dictator, saying that this administration's actions are authoritarianism on steroids. Governor J.B. Pritzker, never before in my life have I called for mass protest disruptions. These Republicans cannot know a moment of peace. You have Rep. Presley saying, "We'll see you in the streets." Rep. Monica McIver, a Democrat representative on Capitol Hill, "We will not take this shit from Donald Trump. He thinks he's a dictator. We are at war." These are Democrat elected officials calling for war against the President of the United States and his supporters. I could go on and on, but again, when you have people in positions of power that are saying things like this every single day for years, you are inspiring violence by people who are already mentally ill. And that's what we've seen against this president for far too long.
This is disinformation and misinformation online. There will be bite-sized clips that will go viral to the point where there are Americans in this country that believe that what happened Saturday night was staged. How does this White House tackle that with social media companies out there, whether it's X, Facebook, Instagram? How do they work with these companies to make sure that doesn't get out of control?
It's certainly a good question, Aisha. I don't have tangible answers for you on what we're doing with social media companies, if anything at all. What I will say is it's very important to us that we get the truth and the facts about this case and any case out there as quickly as possible to dispel some of that crazy nonsense that you do see running rampant online. And I think the Department of Justice and the FBI thus far have done a good job of disseminating the truth and the facts about this alleged attempted assassin, the perpetrator in this case, and I understand he'll be arraigned in court very soon. You all see that, and the Department of Justice will be giving a briefing and an update later today. So as far as we're concerned, just providing maximum transparency and hopefully people will believe the truth rather than the lies and the conspiracies that so often do go crazy on social media.
Caroline.
Rachel.
Thanks, Caroline. Does the administration view this as a security failure, or did the protocols work as they were designed?
The president has said he believes that the protocols worked. Again, you had a perpetrator who tried to breach the security parameter that was set up by Secret Service, and he was running as fast as he could and was immediately neutralized moments later. And again, having been right up there on the stage with the president and the first lady, I can tell you it was seconds before we were told to get down, and it was seconds before we found ourselves in the hold room backstage. It all happened literally within a matter of seconds. The president, the vice president, and the first lady being pulled to safety. That is not done if there's a lapse. So Secret Service did their jobs well. They communicated with one another to remove the president and the vice president to safety as quickly as they could, and obviously to neutralize the shooter as well. And thank God they did, because if that man was allowed into that ballroom, it would have been a much different scene.
And just one more follow-up on just how the White House could be rethinking security protocols going forward. I mean, we all remember after the attempted assassination in Butler, there were indoor rallies that were held after that.
Is that out of the question, changing any additional security protocols when it comes to how the president does these events that are outside of the White House?
I definitely wouldn't say changes are out of the question. I think, again, that it's up to the White House here, and we view it as a great responsibility to ensure the maximum safety of the president and the vice president and the entire cabinet. And so we're always looking for ways to improve security. I think if you just sit here and say everything is perfect all the time, that's not a good way to operate. And so the White House will continue to engage with DHS and with Secret Service to find ways to improve and strengthen security. But as far as Saturday night is concerned, the president was satisfied with the response, and he's very grateful to the men and women who provided the response for him and his wife and members of his team. Deanne.
Thanks, Caroline. The president has talked about rescheduling the dinner within 30 days. Does he have a specific venue in mind, and would he consider hosting it at the White House?
Well, unfortunately, we don't have a room big enough here at the White House, which is another point to be made, and the president is absolutely right. It's why the White House Ballroom project is not just a fun project for President Trump, like you will read in the media. It is actually critical for our national security that a larger, secure building on this complex, which is the most secure complex in the world, is built to accommodate not only large amounts of guests, but also the president, the vice president, members of the cabinet. The line of succession in this country should be able to gather freely in safety without the fear of threats or political violence. And the White House Ballroom will provide that. And so it's critical that we get this project done as quickly as possible.
And then Iran as well.
Thank you, Caroline. Thank you, Caroline. Two questions, if that's all right. First, on the security situation on Saturday, kind of a follow-up here. Previous administrations have sent both the president and the vice president to the dinner, but after the foiled attack on Saturday, if the dinner is rescheduled, would President Trump and Vice President J.D. Vance both plan on attending? And is it wise to have both of them in the same spot, given the presidential line of succession that you mentioned a second ago?
It's definitely a good question, and I know that it's one that will be raised. I can assure you the president intends to attend the event, as he has told all of you publicly. I don't want to rule in or out the vice president's attendance, but certainly that's a conversation that will take place.
And Iran has proposed a mutual reopening of the Strait, leaving the nuclear discussion for later in the process. Given that the nuclear program has been a red line for this administration, would the president agree to that kind of phased negotiation?
Well, only because it's been reported. I will confirm the president has met with his national security team this morning. The meeting may be ongoing, maybe not. I don't want to speak affirmatively because I was prepping to come out here, but the proposal was being discussed. I don't want to get ahead of the president or his national security team. What I will reiterate is that the president's red lines with respect to Iran have been made very, very clear, not just to the American public, but also to them as well.
So they're considering that phased approach?
I wouldn't say they're considering it. I would just say that there was a discussion this morning that I don't want to get ahead of, and you'll hear directly from the president, I'm sure, on this topic very soon.
I'm going to ask you about the Fed chairman, but first, 3 assassination attempts in 3 years. Is this going to change the type of events that the president goes to?
Well, again, that's going to be part of the conversations moving forward. But as you heard from President Trump, he does not want these deranged lunatics and these grave acts of political violence to change our American way of life. And I think it's a very brave thing for him to say. It'd be very easy for him to just hunker down here at the White House where he knows he's safe, but the president wants to be out across the country. He wants to go across the country to meet with Americans. He wants to celebrate the 250th birthday of our nation's anniversary this summer. As you know, we're gearing up for a big UFC fight here on the South Lawn. So there's many exciting events I know the president wants to be part of and will be part of moving forward. He's undeterred in that way, and it's something that inspires all of us here to keep going.
Senator Tillis is now dropping his objection to allowing Kevin Warsh to be confirmed because the DOJ has closed their investigation. Is the president satisfied that an inspector general report into the Federal Reserve is enough to look into these renovations?
The president understands that the inspector general has greater tools at their disposal, perhaps even more powerful than a grand jury, to continue investigating. The financial mismanagement of the Fed building, which is a priority for the president. Look, he's a builder himself. When he sees something has a lot of cost overruns, is taking too long, and in this case ripping off the American taxpayer, he wants to get to the bottom of it. I understand Senator Tillis put out a statement saying he'll support Kevin Warsh's confirmation. That has been our position all along from day one. He is more than qualified for the job, and we look forward to working with the Senate on his swift confirmation process. Megan.
As a follow-up on Warsh, will the president be satisfied once the Fed's Inspector General finishes that investigation, even if it finds no evidence of wrongdoing?
Well, that's a hypothetical question. I'll let the president speak on it when we see the results. It's obviously far too early to say.
And relatedly, as a follow-up, now that it looks like Warsh will be confirmed by the end of Jay Powell's term, is he still considering firing Jay Powell if he stays on as governor after that?
I haven't talked to him about it specifically, but I think the president will be satisfied once Kevin Warsh is confirmed as the Fed chair, which he should be. Karen.
On Iran, the president had said last week that the U.S. has started the process of clearing the Strait of Hormuz of mines. Do you have an update on how many have been removed and an estimate of how long that process could take?
I don't, but I would defer you to the Pentagon on that. We'll make sure they get you an answer, Karen.
It's an ongoing process, though. It's still actually happening right now.
Again, I would defer you to the Pentagon on anything with respect to clearing mines in the Strait of Hormuz.
I know that you said that the White House is reviewing the security protocols for things that could be done differently in the future. Have you identified anything so far that you would like to see done differently, or ask the Secret Service to make any changes in the security protocols for the president, particularly at these large events that are taking place off the White House campus?
Not yet, no, but as I said, there will be a meeting here at the White House in the earlier half of this week, so those conversations will take place.
And on the line of succession...
And I would also just add, look, the Secret Service does not detail their procedures or operations to the public for obvious reasons, because you have crazy people who try to hijack them and get around them. So these conversations will take place in private, but if adjustments need to be made to protect the president, they will be made.
The White House discussed doing like it does, for instance, with a joint address to Congress for these large events, and designating someone as the designated survivor for future large events that the cabinet attends.
Well, those conversations ahead of the Waka dinner did take place, but there were several members of the cabinet in the line of succession who did not attend for various personal reasons. So designating one survivor was not necessary, as we had several members who were not there already.
Caroline, are people forced to dive under tables and fearing for their lives on Saturday night, including many of the people in this room, myself included? What is the president's message to those people who experienced that terrible trauma and maybe are still fearful today?
I think he would say, as he sort of did on Saturday night, coming in here in his tuxedo, we can't allow these crazy people to let us be afraid. We have to keep moving forward, showing up, doing our job, celebrating our country, and doing what we know is right. But certainly we'd like to see the rhetoric against this president and his supporters toned down, because it is inspiring these crazy people across the country to target not just the president, but those who work for him and those who support him. And it must end.
Is he following the arraignment of the suspect today?
Yes, he is, and I know you all want to follow that too. It's happening in a few minutes, so I'll let you all go. The Department of Justice is also going to be speaking momentarily following the arraignment, and I pray that this is the last time I speak to you for some time until after my maternity leave. So thank you guys.
All right, so that is White House Press Secretary Caroline Leavitt giving us an update on the incident over the weekend at the White House Correspondents' Dinner there. And we're actually supposed to get a special report from NBC's Tom Yamas coming up shortly, just to kind of fill us in on that suspect's court appearance today. But for now, let's head to break. We'll be back here in just 2 minutes here on Live Impact News on WCNC Plus. Welcome back here on Live Impact News on WCNC Plus. I'm Nick Sturdivant. All right, so as we mentioned earlier, the largest measles outbreak in the U.S. in decades has ended. The measles outbreak in South Carolina was the largest in the U.S., and the largest the U.S. has seen, I should say, in decades. We're getting an update on that outbreak from officials from the Department of Public Health. Let's take a listen in right now.
Thank you, Baker. Do you have any other follow-up, sir? I'll take that as not at this time. Does anybody else have any questions for Dr. Traxler today? Yes, Briva.
Yes. So can you just state the numbers? So it's not a real fair and balanced conversation about 90-something% effectiveness rate. That coverage, that 3 or 4%, does not deserve the same coverage as 90-something%. And I just get concerned about how we keep getting that part wrong, where that small percent keep getting more emphasis and more focus on over the 90-something% effectiveness of this vaccine and the large number of people in our state that are vaccinated. So can you just refresh those numbers on how effective the vaccine is and the number of people that are vaccinated in our state?
So certainly, so we know that one dose of MMR vaccine gives about 93% of people will have strong lifelong immunity from one dose. If you give then everyone a second dose, then you really get up to about 97% of those who are vaccinated having strong lifelong immunity. And then in terms of the vaccination percentage of our state, I mean, we look at school vaccination as kind of the proxy for that. And so, it varies, as we've seen, I think, during this. And I'm not sure if I'm not maybe understanding your question in terms of the focus. We know that the vast majority, over 90% of the cases, were not vaccinated. And that another smaller percentage were unknown even. But maybe can you clarify something?
No, you did it.
Okay.
No, you got it. The large percent of people who are not vaccinated were the ones who were infected, who had the
vast majority. Yes, ma'am.
Yes. So, okay. And then the numbers will be up on the website so that we can constantly refer back to that spot. So that website's not coming down just because the outbreak is over. We'll have a place, a reliable resource we can go to constantly share information.
I have not been involved. Ron may know more about that. I've not been involved in any discussion about taking down the website or timing.
I can speak to that and say that we will leave it up, and it will be linked and available also as part of the regular measles page that has that's always up. So this will become a part of that page so that anybody who's researching this outbreak or wants to know more about the details or the data from the outbreak can find it very easily.
It may not just be the banner across the top of the.
We'll keep that up for a little bit, and then we'll take that down. But it'll be very easily findable, I promise you. Does anybody else have any questions for Dr. Traxler this afternoon? Seeing none, I just want to reiterate our sincere, heartfelt thanks for all of y'all, especially those of you who have been with us from the very beginning. It's presented many challenges, but it's like any public health outbreak. It's taken a lot of voices and a lot of help to be able to tell the story, to educate the public accurately, and we could not have done it without y'all's considerate approaches, your thoughtful approaches, your questions, and your assistance. And so we remain your servants. If you have anything else that you need from us, Casey and I will be happy to help you. Our email address is media@dph.sc.gov. You can email us with questions at any time. I do want to thank you all for attending today, helping to cover this important story. We appreciate your time and hard work. A recording of this briefing will be made available today on our agency's YouTube page. And if you need help with accessing that, just reach out to us via our media things. But if you have any further questions, reach us at that media inbox. And we hope you have a great rest of the afternoon. And God bless. Thank you.
All right, so that press conference just wrapping up there on the ending of the measles outbreak there in South Carolina. Let's head to break. We'll be back here in just 2 minutes here on Live Impact News on WCNC Plus. Welcome back here on Live Impact News on WCNC Plus. I'm Nick Sertifer. We want to head out to New York City. We're happening right now. New York City Mayor Zohran Mamdani and Governor Kathy Hochul making an announcement regarding the FIFA World Cup. Let's take a listen in.
Number of tickets. Yeah. And I know this comes at a time when the NYPD was very, the Mass Beth Street takeover, for example, Commissioner Tisch criticized that in reckless driving, but they have someone on their own force who has hundreds of, what was the final ticket, Kevin? 547 tickets. Since when? 2022. So I wanted to get your take on that, if you've spoken to the commissioner about that, and then I have a second question.
Yeah, this was something that I think I shared at Friday's press conference, which is that it is part of an active conversation I'm having with the commissioner. This is unacceptable, and we cannot be asking New Yorkers to engage in responsible operations of a motor vehicle and then having those employed by the city flouting that, especially at the extent that's been reported. So that is something that we are actively discussing.
We have time for just 2 more. We'll go Josie and then Annie. Yeah, just wait for the microphone 1 second.
You can just take a moment.
All right, guys. Hi, Mayor. How are you?
How's it going?
Good, thanks. So this morning, the governor released a vertical video on social media describing the PETA pterodactyls without many details. But some people are noting that she's using some methods used by you in talking about income inequality. Do you take credit for that tonal shift? And a second question, I wonder if you could explain a little bit your administration's withdrawing of some proposals to start an AI learning focused high school, as well as close or relocate 3 high schools on the Upper West Side.
So I'll say on the first is that we are appreciative of working together with the governor on tackling not just a fiscal crisis, but also the affordability crisis. And the important thing for all of us in public office is to make the case to New Yorkers in whatever way in which they engage with the world. And many New Yorkers, it is the question of using their phone and social media, and those are not things that I came up with. To your second question, can you just, you were...
So there's the
PEP.
Yeah, 3 Upper West High School, Upper West Side high schools, and then the AI learning focused high school.
So that decision that the chancellor, sorry?
I don't know if it was a high school.
Oh, it's okay. Yeah. That decision that the chancellor made is a decision in direct response to calls from families across School District 3 and community members. And so while those proposals have been removed at this time, those conversations are going to continue. And part of this just comes back to the ethos with which the chancellor leads to ensure that there is adequate time to actually speak to the community about any of these kinds of larger scale proposals that are being made.
And then we've got time for one more.
Those proposals failing if it came to a vote?
This is more of just a reflection of the fact that there were significant enough concerns that would make it worthy to have an extended conversation around these.
Thanks. Annie, go ahead. Last question.
Thank you. Hi, Mayor. How are you?
Hey, Annie. How's it going?
Good, thanks.
Speaking of vertical video.
Yeah, I blame you for that.
I'll take credit for that one.
Speaking of the earlier question about security, a couple weeks ago there was reporting about the MSG facial recognition deployment quite extensively, and Councilmember Shahana Hanif has been pushing her legislation called Ban the Scan, which would regulate some of the uses of facial recognition and other biometric identifying technology at major venues like sports stadiums or even grocery stores. I'm not sure if the speaker is supportive of that or the broader council will support it, but I'm curious about whether that's something that you would support if you've considered that legislation at all.
That is something that we will have to consider to dig into the actual details of that. You said it's sponsored by...
Shahana Hanif.
And what is it called?
Ban the Scan.
Okay, we'll follow up on that.
Thank you so
very
much. That's all the time we have.
Thank you.
All right, so that press conference there wrapping up regarding the FIFA World Cup there. That is, we heard from New York City Mayor Zohran Mamdani. Also, we heard from New York Governor Kathy Hochul. All right, let's come back here at home and let's take a quick break. We'll be back here in just 2 minutes here on Live Impact News on WCNC Plus. Welcome back here on Live Impact News on WCNC Plus. I'm Nick Sertivant. All right, so we are awaiting a special report from NBC News, Time Yanis, on the White House Correspondents' Dinner, alleged shooting suspect, his first court appearance today. So we'll have that for you in just moments as we wait for that special report to start. But in the meantime, we want to get a check on our forecast. Here is weatherman Larry Sprinkle.
Hi, this is Larry Sprinkle checking those weather impacts for the entire week. What's good about this week? We're not talking about any 80-degree days, anything above that. Sunshine for the afternoon. We have a couple opportunities for some showers. In fact, there's about 3 chances we'll have rain for the entire week. And here's the way it shapes up tomorrow. A few isolated rain showers, certainly not a washout. I think Wednesday is a decent day for a decent amount of rainfall. We could get maybe in some spots up to about a ½ inch. We certainly need a lot more than that. And then on Saturday, we do see another chance of some scattered showers out there. So at least 3 days this week, we're talking about the potential for some much needed rain across the entire area. As we take you into the afternoon, we're talking about temperatures in the 70s today. Now, we should be in the mid-70s. We're only going to be in the low 70s for the afternoon. Even around 8 o'clock tonight, temperatures will be under clear skies in the mid-60s at that time. Once again, the average high is 76 this time of the year. Over the next several days, and we mentioned this a minute ago, we're talking about temperatures right around average or below for every day this week. Once again, the average high is 76, the mildest day of the week. The average high is 76. That's where we'll be on Wednesday. Then we take you all the way to the end of the week, back in the low 70s on Thursday and Friday. So that's some good news. No 80-degree temperatures anytime soon across the entire region. Average high 76 degrees. Our high today 73. As we take you right into the middle of the afternoon, we'll be in the low 70s. About 9 o'clock, if you're out and about for whatever reason, take a stroll outside. We'll be in the mid-60s across the entire region at that time. That's the good news. Rain chances for the next 5 days. We'll take you into the upcoming week. And we mentioned this, that there is a few isolated shower possibilities on Tuesday. Not a washout. Wednesday is that day we're going to see clouds out there. It'll be mild temperatures with rain likely. There may be a stray thunderstorm or two. Dry weather on Thursday and Friday. We head into the upcoming weekend. You got plans. I would say the best day for the upcoming weekend with lots of sunshine is going to be on Sunday, because Saturday is that day that we do see the opportunity of some scattered showers and maybe a stray thunderstorm. We put the chance in about 40%, and that would be on Saturday across the region. Let's go ahead and check that Jerry Hunt Supercenter 7-day forecast. Shaping up to be a beautiful day today, mainly sunny skies, just a few fair weather clouds, high close to 73 degrees. Tomorrow afternoon will be in the low 70s with about a 30% coverage of showers. And once again, we do mention that Wednesday it is going to be a cloudy day. Periods of rain in the forecast, not expecting any drenching rain, but certainly the opportunity for some much needed rain showers. We'll hit about 76 degrees on Wednesday. Sunshine, scattered clouds on Thursday. Thursday's high temperature right around 73 degrees. Friday is going to be another below average temperature day. We're going to be right around 72 degrees with a low that morning of 51. Now, as we head into the upcoming weekend, we have that one day, and that's Saturday, with clouds out there. And with that cloud cover, this air mass is going to be very cool. We're talking about temperatures in the upper 60s. So that means we're going to limit the opportunity for any strong storms. I think it's just going to be mainly some scattered light rain showers around the region on Saturday, with a low that morning of 49. So we start out at 49 in the morning, 69 in the afternoon. And then for Sunday afternoon, after starting in the mid-40s, temperatures still below average at about 71 degrees across the entire area. So when we're talking about a 7-day stretch with temperatures below average or right around average, that's some really good news considering how warm it was the past several days, and several opportunities. So much needed rainfall across the entire region. That's your forecast. I'm Larry Sprinkle. Hope you have a nice day.
No, I hope you have a nice day, Larry. All right, that's Larry Sprinkle, weatherman Larry Sprinkle, with our full forecast. Let's head to break. We'll be back here in just 2 minutes here on Live Impact News on WCNC Plus. Welcome back here on Live Impact News on WCNC Plus. Up next, Start Event. We want to toss it over to our content partners in St. Louis, Missouri, KSDK, as they are tracking a tornado warning for St. Louis and numerous surrounding counties. Let's take a listen in.
That they were concerned with initially coming into St. Louis. No confirmation of a tornado on the ground, but the circulations are still there. And when we're dealing with this outflow boundary that we're monitoring, and what the outflow boundary is, basically it's this. Okay, from the earlier thunderstorms. It's pressed a boundary down to the south. When we have those boundaries and you get thunderstorms that interact with those boundaries, the potential exists for additional spin.
All right, so we want to get away from this and we want to head over to an NBC special report with Tom Yama. So let's take a listen in.
Of Saturday's White House Correspondents' Dinner, what the White House is calling an assassination attempt is making his initial appearance in a Washington, D.C. courtroom right now. Authorities say 31-year-old Cole Thomas Allen rushed past a security checkpoint outside the dinner armed with multiple weapons, and he is accused of shooting a Secret Service agent. This video capturing him as he ran through a security checkpoint. His intended targets, allegedly the president and top cabinet officials. We expect to learn what the charges Allen will face shortly. Cameras are not allowed inside the courtroom, but our reporters inside will be sending us notes in real time that I will bring to you and our team will bring to you as soon as the hearing gets underway. So far, we know that Allen has been walked in to that courtroom right now. He is sitting, he is wearing a blue jumpsuit, and he is flanked by 2 U.S. Marshals that are on each side of him. We understand that the matter is now unsealed, that according to the judge who's just announced that in court, and the pretrial services are about to begin right now. Kelly O'Donnell joins our coverage now. Kelly, a quick question to you, because Saturday night after this happened, there were some announcements of 2 initial charges. Do we expect to hear those formally today, or will there be additional charges as well, do we expect?
Well, in the appearance today, when they say the matter is unsealed, they are now unsealing the charges against this 31-year-old California man. So this will be the first time we get a sense of those charges. Saturday night, there were some preliminary expected weapons-related charges. We think a lot of work has been done in the hours since then, going through the evidence both at the hotel where this event occurred, in his hotel room. He, of course, checked into the Washington Hilton Hotel in advance of the White House Correspondents' Dinner as a part of the alleged planning of this suspect. Also, he traveled from California on a train, a multi-day trip to get to Washington. We know, based on the weapons that were recovered, those were purchased legally. But as they explore his electronic footprint, they conducted searches at his California home and at the hotel. They've been piecing together evidence, and included were some writings he sent to his family that we have been able to review. They were provided to us by a senior White House official, and that describes some of his intention and thought. And that's why the White House has so comfortably labeled this an assassination attempt. We'll have to see if the charges bear that out in the specific details. Clearly, the man was armed, was moving toward the ballroom where the president and many other dignitaries were attending the dinner. 2,600 guests in a very crowded ballroom, many members of the cabinet, dignitaries, ambassadors from the U.S. and other countries were there. It was a high-profile event, which in and of itself could have been a target. But we understand from what authorities tell us was included in this writing to his family that he had intention talking about members of the Trump administration. He did not name President Trump, but some of what he wrote seemed to indicate he was alluding to President Trump and others who were serving in the administration. We will know much more when these documents are available to us. They have not been available yet. We would expect to see an FBI affidavit where an FBI agent swears to some of the initial evidence that's been brought before the court that helps to support whatever charges come. These will certainly be felonies. They are at the federal level. But this magistrate appearance today is the most beginning of these kinds of events. He may not enter any kind of a plea. This is simply telling him what the charges are against him. He is at this point supplied by counsel, federal defense counsel that is provided to him, public defender. And so it's an early step. But when we get those charging documents, the specifics of the complaint will have more information. This may ultimately go to a grand jury where still more will come out, but this is a critical first step in what could be a long-time prosecution. In many of these potentially violent or terroristic type attacks, the suspect is, in many instances, is shot and killed or somehow loses his or her life in it. This is a more unusual case where the suspect was not injured. He was subdued at the hotel, and now he has rights and a process that begins. I'm being told 3 counts?
3 counts.
Okay, let's look at those counts to get the specifics here.
Yeah, the attempt to assassinate the president, 3 counts on that, Kelly. The judge, when you were reporting, said there were several charges here, so this is going to be a little bit till we get everything in. And our team, again, is reporting from inside the courtroom back to me and Kelly. The cameras aren't allowed there. So far, all we know, he's been, here comes more, an attempt to assassinate the president of the United States. It looks like 3 counts of that, Kelly, as we know. That, of course, you know, if he is convicted, up to life in prison if he were to be found guilty. We're going to wait some more of this. We also learned he's 31 years old. He has a graduate degree, a master's degree, I should say. He pronounces his name Cole Tomas Allen. And as you said, he has asked the court to appoint him an attorney.
He's an educated suspect, Tom.
He is.
And
Count 2, transportation of a firearm and ammunition through the interstate commerce with intent to commit a felony. You were talking about that train trip. We know that he took a train from California all the way to Washington, Kelly?
That's correct, and that would account for taking firearms across state lines, lawfully purchased firearms, but taking them across state lines with an intent to commit a crime. That's its own kind of felony. So that explains that. The 3 counts of attempted assassination, I'll be curious to see if that ties with discharging his weapon. If he fired his weapon multiple times,
that's
that
count
could
3. It just came in. It just came in. That's count 3. Yeah, so you're right about that. That one just came in. He has been fully briefed on these charges, and he says that he is aware of the charges against him.
And that will be a part of determining that he is capable of being in this process. We have seen in some instances where the mental acuity of a defendant is at issue. He is saying he understands his rights. He understands the charges against him. That's an important part of the process. At this point, these are very serious charges, of course, and it is against the backdrop of growing political violence in the country, Tom, something that President Trump has personally experienced with multiple attempts on his life, and many other figures across the political spectrum have had criminal acts against them for being in the political space. This is certainly a very notable case, one that stands out as we're learning more about the specifics here.
And as you mentioned something earlier, it sparked a reminder here. Initially, when this hearing started, the judge had asked him if he had taken any drugs, any medication, or any alcohol in the last 24 hours. He said he had not. And that is, you know, part of the procedure here to make sure he understands the charges against him, Kelly.
And we know from investigators that they spoke to his brother and to his sister in authorities having interviews with investigators. The brother, when he received that emailed message to the family, did alert police in New London, Connecticut. And there was a connection from that local police department forwarding that information sort of across to federal partners and ultimately getting to the command center here in Washington that was dealing with the event at the Washington Hilton Hotel. So the family cooperated in that way. Authorities also tell me that the sister spoke about escalating rhetoric from her brother and that the family was concerned about the way he talked about world events, a variety of world events and national political events. We know from what others describe, he was engaged in a lot of that, had concerns about what was happening, and according to the document that we reviewed, had a sense that he needed to be the one to take action. More of that will play out. We'll have to learn more about the specifics, any mitigating facts that may come forward.
Kelly, we're now learning exactly what he was holding, according to the assistant U.S. attorney who's reading this now to the judge, a 12-gauge pump-action shotgun, a .38 caliber semi-automatic pistol, 3 knives, and, quote, other dangerous paraphernalia. The assistant U.S. attorney now asking the judge and requesting that there be no chance at bond for this suspect as it speaks because of the severity of the crimes. And speaking to that this was premeditated. It was planned before he got on that train from California to Washington, D.C., and that his intended target was to assassinate the President of the United States.
And that will be a case they will have to outline with specific information as they learn more from his writings, his social media profile, interviews they conduct with family members, those who know him, some of the facts on the scene. There's ballistic evidence that is being processed. There were bullet holes in a wall at the hotel. And a reminder to our audience, this suspect did not get to the ballroom level where those 2,600 guests were assembled, including the president, vice president, first lady, and many dignitaries. He was on a floor above that in a public space that had been used as part of the general reception for all of those guests. And there were layers of barricades and metal detectors and those kinds of steps. He was seen on video running through one of those metal detectors after the event had begun and all other guests were assembled inside. He was subdued by a variety of officers there. There was a discharge of weapons. I'm told he fired his weapon and that there was return fire from law enforcement. And that is when the Uniform Division Secret Service officer was struck in the vest by some projectile. And he thankfully was not injured. He certainly took the full force of that, but he was only briefly at the hospital and then released. So no injuries here. The suspect was not injured. The president was safe as well.
And Kelly, I understand now from the notes that we're getting in court, there's going to be a detention hearing now at 11 a.m. this Thursday. His public defender has said that Mr. Allen has no prior arrests or convictions. And of course, he would say this as his attorney. He is presumed innocent at the time. It sounds like they will have this detention hearing on Thursday as long as the judge signs off on it. So it sounds, at least in this case, things are moving pretty quickly in this case.
Exactly. And that's what we expected. This type of hearing, this first appearance, is very brief. No entrance of plea. The discussion of detention would come next. There would be a discussion, is there bail, is there not bail? The government will present its request for no bail opportunity. His defense counsel will have a chance to respond. He will now be in the custody of the U.S. Marshals. Prior to this, he'd been held by Washington Metropolitan Police prior to being charged as a federal defendant. They were able to hold him for a period of time simply on the suspicion of what happened Saturday night. There will be many steps to come and so much more to learn, Tom.
I want to bring in Tom Winter now, who covers law enforcement for us. Tom, there is so much evidence, at least from what federal investigators and Secret Service and our own reporting show against this man right now. Talk to us about some of the key pieces we have. There's been talk of this manifesto. There's the surveillance video of him sprinting across that initial security checkpoint, and then him, of course, on the ground in handcuffs there at the scene with weapons allegedly on him.
You know, that's right, Tom, and that evidence is pretty strong as it's been shared with us so far. It's 3 counts total here. So the key one is the attempt to assassinate the President of the United States. That does carry a life sentence if he's convicted to that, up to a life sentence. There's also count 3 there, that discharge of a firearm. That's a mandatory minimum if he's convicted of that. What they seem to have extrapolated is some intent. From that note that we've been reporting on, that's very clear, as you mentioned, a manifesto detailing the exact reasons why he was there. There's little room for interpretation. He specifically references the Trump administration and his whole game plan for how he was going to carry this out and his reasons for doing so. You've got this video that you're looking at right now, which we're going to start to see be played out shortly, where he will come running in from the left, going past the checkpoint. Here he is coming right now. You can see him dressed in all dark clothing, presumably holding a rifle there, just the way that he looks. That was as they were kind of breaking down the magnetometer and the checkpoint. Here he is lying on the ground shortly thereafter, after he's taken into custody and stripped to make sure he's got no other explosive devices on him. He is going to be held until that hearing. And one of the things that we'll get, Tom, in the coming couple of days, and presumably a lot of detail in today's complaint, once that is publicly filed to the docket, we will know more about that. But they will also file a detention memo from federal prosecutors where they can lay out some additional evidence that goes just beyond the basic requirements to bring these charges against him. And sometimes we can get a lot more information out of those filings. I will note, and some folks might point out, that there's a preliminary hearing scheduled for May 11th. That will almost assuredly not happen. He will likely be indicted by a federal grand jury well before that date. But because he's being arrested on what we call a complaint, they have to enter enter that date for there to be a hearing to see whether or not the evidence, weigh the evidence rather, on this complaint. But the most serious charge is the first one, the attempted assassination of the President of the United States. This is now officially the third attempted assassination against the President, Donald J. Trump. 2 attempts, of course, while he was a candidate for office. A third one now that he is in office that apparently occurred or allegedly occurred, according to the Justice Department, on Saturday night. Those 2 previous ones, one in Butler, Pennsylvania, Thomas Matthew Crooks, and then a second one near his golf course in Florida with Ryan Routh, who was convicted several months ago as a result of his federal trial there. Crooks, of course, was killed by a U.S. Secret Service sniper, counter-sniper that was up on the roof at that incident. Unlike that first incident involving Crooks in Butler, Pennsylvania, we now have, Tom, to your point earlier, just a tremendous amount of evidence because we have a note. With Crooks, we didn't have really any social media profile, no writings, nothing really left behind. Crooks is very clear here, as I mentioned before, and also discussed the security at the hotel. We see him there flanked by officers, this image being put out by the president on Saturday evening after he arrived back at the White House. But this is just a very different case than that, and obviously they will continue their investigation, presumably continue to get surveillance video. Some, according to our colleagues, including Kelly O'Donnell, contains him going in through the stairwell to get down there so he's not detected in the elevators. Much more to come, Tom, I'm sure, as we continue to get these charges in.
And as we look back on those 3 assassinations attempts, this one marks the 3rd one. Tom, there's also that Pakistani man that is on trial. I believe he's still on trial, saying that Iran had hired him to kill President Trump and other administration officials as well. So there have been both plots and assassination attempts against the president's life. Tom, in that manifesto, do we know if it was just an MO, if you will, right, his modus operandi, or was there also a plan of attack in there as well? Did he lay out what he wanted to do? Because I've seen some reporting out there about, administration officials were the targets in sort of an order of importance.
That's exactly right. I mean, I think he understood, if you read this note, that this, in his eyes, was the best opportunity because he thought he could get closest to the president. That's what he says in the note. He also talks about the fact that he wanted to go after administration officials. I think he knew by the time he would get too close to where Trump was, he would have been confronted by law enforcement, but certainly was up for any sort of top officials. Interestingly, we don't know why he says that he was not going to go after the FBI director, Kash Patel, but he definitely seemed to go after administration officials. And that, big picture here, Tom, you referenced the charges against that Pakistani individual. We're not even talking about the threats that are investigated by the Secret Service, the threats that are prosecuted, let alone plots. And so now if you have individuals that think, you know what, maybe I can't get to Donald Trump, maybe I can get to other members of the Trump administration, the headache, not just for the Secret Service, but for the diplomatic security service that covers the State Department or for the military, for the Secretary of War, just the security posture that we now have to be in. And oh, by the way, we're in the middle of a war. It's a really complex picture here going forward.
I want to bring in Danny Savalos. Danny, there's going to be a detention hearing, we know, this week. Do you see any scenario where this man is released from federal custody?
Zero. This is what you call a presumption case, and that even came up during the hearing, the very brief hearing today. Normally, the Bail Reform Act says that people have a presumption of bail when they appear before the magistrate. But there are certain cases in which there's a presumption that no set of circumstances or conditions will keep the public safe or ensure the defendant's appearance at trial. So this is what we call a presumption case. You've got guns. Those are usually presumptions. He will remain in custody no matter what happens in 3 days at the bail hearing.
All right, Danny Savalos, we thank you. I want to get quickly to Gabe Gutierrez, who's covering this from the White House. Gabe, the White House has come out today to highlight what happened on Saturday night, to talk about security and steps going forward. And it's really unclear how this event changes the president's schedule going forward in the events he holds, whether they be indoors or outdoors.
Yes, that's right, Tom. Look, the president has said that he wants to redo this dinner within the next 30 days or so. Right now, it's very unclear exactly how that will happen, what venue it would happen at. The White House is using this opportunity to try and make the case for why the president wants that massive ballroom that has been very controversial and has been tied up in the courts right now. That ballroom proposed to be 90,000 square feet, and the president saying private donations would cover it. It would only hold about 1,000 people, though. And as you heard earlier, earlier, the White House Correspondents' Dinner, more than 2,000 people at that event. Now, just a short time ago, we heard from Caroline Leavitt. She says this week, Secret Service, DHS, and the White House Chief of Staff, Susie Wiles, will hold a meeting to discuss security moving forward, Tom.
Gabe Gutierrez. First, I want to thank Gabe and Danny and Tom and Kelly for their coverage. This is going to conclude this NBC News special report. A reminder, we're going to be back here in about an hour for a DOJ news conference on this same incident. And of course, we'll have much more on our streaming network, NBC News Now, online at NBCNews.com, and a full wrap-up tonight on Nightly News. I'm Tom Yamas. We thank you for watching.
All right, let's head to break. We'll be back here in just 2 minutes here on Live Impact News on WCNC Plus. Welcome back here on Live Impact News on WCNC Plus. I'm Nick Sturdivant. We want to head back to St. Louis, Missouri, to our content partners, KSDK, where they are tracking tornado warnings for parts of the St. Louis metro area. It looks like that tornado and that storm system is moving out of that area into about roughly southwest Illinois. Let's take a listen into their coverage.
Draw where I do believe that this is probably the circulation that we're at least taking a quick look at. And I would say right about here. Let's use this as a general broad term simply because I think that rotation could happen anywhere from here to even right about here, right? I think all of it's kind of lowering to some degree, and whether or not it's creating area at the surface to rotate. However, like I said, this is an area where we've got some pretty good amount of eyeballs on it. So let's track a couple of different things and talk about this from a standpoint of getting out ahead of it. Scott always mentions that, and I think that's a good thing. The data is very fast in today's world, but still, as fast as these storms move, we want to give you a little bit of a leading edge time, and we'll include Edwardsville in that as well. I'm going to stop right there, and we'll go from Maryville at 120. We're going to go to Edwardsville 122, and really from Glen Carbon, you're pretty much already there. But that's the spot that I want to stop at here and stay even near St. Jacob. And I know you're kind of on the edge of the polygon, but now let's take a deep dive and see if we can see anything that maybe gives us a better idea. This is our lone tornado warning, which means the other one expired. They've added the other one, and that's where we continue to focus on exactly where this is. And I still think it's that same area of circulation. As I drag this back out just a little bit more, we're going to see where this is. These are the brighter colors, and I want to get down to street level and show you. To me, if it looks like to me, I know the colors are off a little bit, but to me, this is the area of circulation probably at 270 and 255 in the Metro East near Glen Carbon. That's the spot that we're looking at where you see that potential for, there's an area of circulation. You see that potential for a tornado. That would be where I would look at and say, if there is a tornado or if there is rotation right now, even if it is elevated, could have the potential to lower at any given point. That would be where I would pick at the moment. Does it mean that's going to occur? Not exactly, but that's exactly how these types of things set up in terms of a radar estimated tornado. And when you look at this here, you get this from a broad perspective, and we pull this back a little bit here, and you see that, yeah, there's a possibility for that where the circulation may be occurring. So we take a quick look at it, and now we look right about here. And it doesn't mean necessarily that we have eyeballs on it, but that's where I would look at, and that is a standpoint of 70 and 55. That's where we would look at and say, yeah, that's the possibility where there may be a tornado that's involved. This is, a spot where you would take a look at that and say, well, that's where the tornado could be at this point. And still, this is a radar indicated circulation, as we so often talk about. That does not mean that it's a confirmed tornado. That means radar indicates that the potential for a tornado is there, and that's why everybody in this path should seek shelter. And so as we find out exactly where that should be, that's where I want you to pay attention. If you have somebody that you know that's on the road coming back at any point here, that's where we really want you to focus on here and take a quick look at this. Now, from Edwardsville, even if you're in Edwardsville, SIUE, I would prefer you to take shelter. I know that definitely everybody in school is taking this seriously. If you're still in school or finishing up finals, exams, things like that, that's where I know that they're taking this pretty seriously. But I'm going to draw this for the entire line simply because I think it's important to note that I know you're hopefully already in your safe place or in the bathroom in Edwardsville, following along what's going on. You look this here to Marine to about 1:35. So like I said, this still goes until about 2 o'clock. So, from a standpoint of how long this is still a pretty good long warning for Madison County, Illinois, because of the nature of where this storm is. But you'll notice this is the one line of circulation along where this is. And to be honest with you, and Scott, you can probably agree or disagree, but, this looks like to me that this has more, at least embedded circulations than the one that got the city and county warned. I know we saw that initial line in Maryland Heights, but for this one specifically, this one looks like it has a couple of more spots even near Edwardsville now, and then on the bottom part of this now and now even with that latest scan, I'm going to take a quick look at that. To me, this looks like we've got a little bit more. We got a little bit more of that circulation here from Glen Carbon to Edwardsville. There are a couple of more spots here where I think it's not out of the question that, we still see that circulation. Do you think that there may be a couple of more spots, or maybe this is a better aligned than the one that moved through the city?
It certainly seems like that at this point. So that's one thing that we're looking at here. This whole area, there's a couple of spots in there. And of course, the SIU Edwardsville campus here is right there. So, they should be secure there. Now, Lambert just reported a wind gust of 59 miles per hour out of the north. And so that was from the storm, I guess, probably from the air from this storm kind of surging south behind it. So there still could be some really strong winds here across parts of North County as well that aren't necessarily tornadic winds, but that are winds that are enough to bring down some trees or bring down at least some tree branches and cause some power outages. And I think that's something we need to be concerned about too. But the immediate threat here is really coming in between Glen Carbon and Edwardsville. These areas here where the circulations still are persistent, we look at that, we see the circulations in here. We don't have any confirmation yet. We've heard from the spotters. The Skywarn spotters are out there in Madison County. They've said they've noted rotation, but they haven't seen a funnel. Okay, that was the last we heard from them. Okay, Glen Carbon. Now, this is where 270 and 55 kind of split off here as you would go up towards Litchfield. So this warning does include all of that, and it goes over just north of St. Jacob over towards Marine. So again, we want you in your safe safe place here, but it looks like it's right along 270 where the greatest circulation is, and that will eventually transition to being right along 70 as it continues to move, generally speaking, mostly due east. So just putting that time track on here for the next few minutes as to who's in the path of this. And again, jumping out ahead because it's right now on your doorstep in the Edwardsville area. And we're going to take this off to the east and right along the interstate here. Here's some of the places that we should be concerned about. St. Mary's Catholic School here. It's in that area right now. Troy Junction, Coon Station, over to Troy School, and Marine School. So, you know, you're over here, you're approaching Illinois Route 4. You should be in your safe place now in those areas. Now, one of the things we've had this afternoon is a lot of the school districts are trying to dismiss early to get ahead of the storms because the thought was that most of the more intense thunderstorms would not arrive until a little later this afternoon, and that thought still continues. This is just kind of the precursor. This is the appetizer. We are looking at the potential for much larger tornadoes, much longer-lived tornadoes as we head into this afternoon. Part of that's going to be associated with this boundary that's down into northern Jefferson County into St. Clair County. It's not happening right this minute, but that boundary is going to become the focus later on this afternoon. At this moment, the storm of concern is the one that's in Madison County. It's right on top of Edwardsville right now, and it is moving towards the east between Edwardsville and Glen Carbon is mostly where that is. These storms that are in St. Charles County, they still have some downpours. They still have some gusty winds. Exiting North County and heading into the area north of the tornado warning, south of Alton, you're looking at some of those gusty winds as well, probably just below severe limits, but nonetheless some gusty winds in there along with the torrential rain. But this is the tornado warning area that includes Edwardsville down to Glen Carbon and points to the east. So if we get in really close into that area, you'll see what we're talking about here. When we get in really tight, you know, it's right over the SIU campus right now, okay? This is University Park Drive, so it's right over the campus. And because there's a little notch in there, that has us a little bit concerned. I'm going to pop on the wind in here to see if it shows up as any big circulation. Not really, but there's definitely spin in here in the clouds. Definitely some spin in the clouds. So again, we want you in your safe place. That includes going east towards Illinois 159, Glen Carbon Road. There's the Governor's Parkway, which goes over towards Interstate 55. All of these areas here along 270 in Madison County, in Illinois, you need to be in your safe spot if you're east of Illinois 157 at this point. That's kind of the back edge of this, or it's right there at the moment, and then going to the east of 157 all the way over to Interstate 55 and then beyond to Illinois Route 4. Those are the areas right now that are under the gun right along 70 with this tornado warning that's in effect for Madison County in Illinois. Your safe place? That's a basement if you have it. If you don't have a basement, go to the lowest level of whatever building you're in and, you know, try to get into a bathroom, a closet, a hall. You're putting as many walls between you and the outside as possible, and you're staying away from windows. We're also wearing our shoes today should there be a problem and an actual tornado does touch down. That's a very it's a 15% chance is what we have for any one spot around our area today to have a tornado within 25 miles. And you're saying, well, 15%, that's not really a lot. In the scheme of tornadoes, that's a pretty high threat. Now, this one looks like it would be more of a spin-up type tornado. In fact, if anything, we may be seeing the storm weaken a little bit, but it's also pouring at the radar site, so you've got some attenuation out at the radar. Rest of the metro, there's the heavy rain over the radar site coming again into the Chesterfield Valley, up through Harvester, and then heading up into...
All right, so that is coverage from our content partners there in St. Louis, Missouri, KSDK. All right, let's take a look here. Where is this, James? I-77, sorry, got it. I-77 northbound near Huntersville. You see right there.
Your producer's got you.
Appreciate
I'm
you.
here for you.
All right, so I-77 northbound near Huntersville, you see there, past this bridge, a pile of dirt. So this pile of dirt is creating a little bit of a traffic mess. 2 lanes closed. It appears from this angle, not an accident, no cars involved, but dirt right there in those 2 lanes.
Pesky dirt, man.
Pesky dirt. Do we know where this dirt came from the back of a truck, or?
I could only presume.
It looks like, at first it looked like construction, but again, this is causing a little bit of a mess there. Debris spill, we'll call it, on I-77 northbound. So if you're headed near that area, in the Huntersville area, just be on the lookout and just be a little patient out there on the road on I-77. All right, we'll continue to keep an eye on that. But first, let's head to break. We'll be back here in just 2 minutes here on Live Impact News on WCNC Plus. Welcome back here on Live Impact News on WCNC Plus. I'm Nick Sturdivant. We have a few things that we're keeping an eye on. First one, out of D.C., we're expected to hear from FBI Director Kash Patel, also the DOJ, regarding the White House Correspondents' Dinner shooting suspect and developments in that case. But we want to head over here where not sure who plane that is. But
I know we were expecting the King and Queen at 3 p.m. It's
Right.
not quite 3 p.m., but that certainly looks like it could be them.
It could be them. So it's 2:30. We're expecting them at 3. But let me lay it out for you. King Charles III and Queen Camilla visiting the U.S. And according to BBC, the first British state visit to the country since Queen Elizabeth II visit in 2007. So it's almost been 20 years. Now, this trip comes as the U.S. approaches the 250th anniversary of its independence from Britain. So, again, we were expecting them at 3. I'm not sure that is their plane, but I see the flag there on the on the tail of the plane. So I'm pretty sure that's them that landed there on Joint Base Andrews in Maryland. Well, it looks like we got some confirmation that King Charles and Queen Camilla have landed. So it looks like that is them. So as soon as we were wondering for a bit because we saw that group sort of to get larger right there on the tarmac as they waited for the plane. So as once they step off the plane, we will come back to you, come back to this shot there, Joint Base Andrews. But we want to head over a lot closer to home, probably in your backyard if you're watching this. This is I-77 northbound near Huntersville. Some debris, some dirt right there on I-77 causing at first those two lanes to be blocked, and now looks like one lane is partially blocked, and folks are navigating their way through that dirt. Some
looks dusty.
It looks very dusty, and one thing, it looks like folks are either driving through it or driving around it. So it doesn't look like to be causing too many problems right now there on I-77, but at one point 2 lanes were closed, now 1 lane partially closed. All right, so let's head back to St. Louis, Missouri, as they are in the middle of some strong storms moving that way, headed towards southwest Illinois. Let's take a listen in to our content partners, KSDK.
Away. So there is some, it's pretty close in terms of beam height, which is important for us, but it also may be close enough where, it's littered with at least some of the, not necessarily the cone there, but you'll see how that's been shaved off a little bit here as we continue to see that most recent update here. But like I said, this is where we are right now at a 109 and a 100 right along Manchester, before Ellisville, before Clarkson Valley, and honestly, it's 1:30, and if you have anybody from Marquette or Lafayette getting out of school early, I can tell you that road is probably crazy right now. So when you're dealing with the thunderstorm that's going on right now, let me drag this back and pull out where this may be. Like I said, you have this inflow of wind, which could be at least a little bit of rotation, but it doesn't mean that it is anything. There's nothing that tells me that this is more of something we're watching at this point, right? So I want to pop back and forth and let's get back to where we are with our lone tornado. And the reason for our cut into coverage, even though we're just talking about NBC News now, so we're not breaking into NBA like we probably will later on tonight. Sorry in advance. Make sure you have your parents' Peacock password. Anyway, 270 and 55. It's still this little area right here specifically that is right at 55 and 270. And that's what I would continue to see what's going on right now. I do want to check in. Let's check in. Lance is in Wildwood, from what I understand. Yeah, he's not talking. That's okay. We'll check in with Lance later on. But Lance is doing a check-in, and that is the lowering. And so, Scott, this is kind of what we have mentioned, right, where we have seen a lot of these clouds, there's plenty of moisture at the surface. And what we continue to look at here is as this cloud cover looks outside, you'll see where we have a lot of scary looking clouds. But we also have enough moisture at the surface where until they lower at the ground surface and rotate, they're not going to cause any problems. And so, yeah, this is 44 right now, probably down Eureka from my perspective. Yeah, so looking backwards now, that's the move. And Lance is on 44, probably past Eureka, past that exit, heading towards Six Flags. From looking out at this. And so, yeah, this is an area where, once again, we run into these bluffs where, it's tough to see certain things, and then all of a sudden you get to the top of the hill and you see them, right? So that's what Lance is going to track in. We'll check in with him later on. So as we continue to focus on what's happening outside right now, this is the spot right there. That's why we have a tornado watch all in place until 9 o'clock. This is the beginning of where we are with multiple areas along this. You even look at this closer to Gasconade, Herman. This is just kind of indicative of how this, you would see, well, why isn't this moving in this direction, right? It's just not the case. And Scott, this is where we're going to see this boundary. Look how the clearing is already settled in, which I know is why Lance is driving that way on 44. Would you not agree? Because this area is going to be very ripe for the supercell thunderstorm development, which is the reason for our tornado watch and our messaging where the serious tornado threat, and we're not talking about smaller ones, not that those aren't important, but significant tornado development throughout the rest of the afternoon and evening.
Yeah, and I think that's one thing we're going to have to really be, the message that we want you to hear is that not everybody's going to get severe weather, but some of us have the potential to have something significant today. Not just brief spin-up tornadoes, which, yes, they cause problems and do damage, but we're also talking about the potential for something that's on the ground for an extended period of time somewhere in our area. And that's what we're getting prepared for this afternoon. This is Chesterfield here. That's Clarkson going out away from the Chesterfield. This is the old Chesterfield Mall area. Okay, you can see the heavy rain has moved in here now. There is also hail with this storm as well. So there's the potential that we have hail and wind with this storm. And certainly at this point, you can tell that we are getting the torrential rainfall occurring with this right now as well. So we're going to push this over and move to the radar, and the two warnings. Still have that tornado warning east of Edwardsville. Circulation, if there is anything that's actually going to drop out of this storm, it's now going to be just to the east of Interstate 55. So that's Madison County. The severe thunderstorm warning here encompasses northwest St. Louis County. It includes still a good portion of St. Charles County from Harvester up into St. Charles and then down into the valley, down into Wildwood, no longer in effect for Franklin County. But these areas have some circulation in them. That boundary is down to the south. Now, traditionally, once an outflow boundary gets away from a thunderstorm, these thunderstorms have a hard time getting rooted in the surface. In other words, the really warm, humid air that's available right at ground level, they can't draw that up, and so they have somewhat of a harder time trying to produce a tornado. But if this storm interacts with this boundary in a certain way, then there's the potential something does in fact spin up. So that's for St. Charles County, probably for about another 10 or 15 minutes, and then it'll be exclusively into St. Louis County, especially west along and west.
All right, let's head to break. We'll be back here in just 2 minutes here on Live Impact News on WCNC Plus. Welcome back here on Live Impact News on WCNC Plus. I'm Nick Sturtevant. We want to head over to Joint Base Andrews, Maryland, where just a few moments ago, and we brought it to you live, King Charles III and Queen Camilla have just landed at Joint Base Andrews in Maryland, as I almost said it like some of my friends in Maryland, as they begin their state visit to mark the 250th anniversary of U.S. independence. Now, the British royals will be greeted at the White House by President Donald Trump there. You see those folks there. They have been patiently waiting we saw them start to gather about an hour ago, roughly, but they have been patiently waiting there again as the British royals will soon get off the plane there and head to the White House to be greeted by President Trump there. So we'll continue to keep our eye on this. As soon as they get off the plane, we'll show it to you live. But we want to head now back to St. Louis, our content partner, KSDK from St. Louis, Missouri, as they deal with some strong storms there, a tornado watch for much of that area. Let's take a listen.
St. Louis County, you can see there's definitely some tree damage there. And, now we're at the point, Gary, where we also have, and here's John's video of it, you can just kind of see how that wind caused the trees. And that looks like a Bradford pear, which they don't really count when it comes to severe weather because they're so weak. But those taller trees are more significant. Yeah. That's a different setup there. But yeah, we have that potential here this afternoon for significant problems across the area before all is said and done. I mean, we're just really getting started right now.
Let's check in with Lance while we're at it. If Lance is ready to talk, let's check in to see what he's up to. Lance, welcome to the coverage. What's happening out there?
Yeah, so we're southwest. Gary, you were talking about that earlier. This is the area that has the higher potential for a tornado, a strong tornado or two. So we're in position for that for later on this afternoon. I want to show you what I'm looking at, what we're noticing right now. Let's go up to the roof mount. There we go. Okay. So as you look off to the east, there's some sunshine breaking through the clouds. See how bright that is over there? And you can actually see the building cumulus there as well, where that vertical motion is within that heat that's rising. As we look back up to the north, that was actually more southeast, but if you look up to the north, that's where the cooler rain-cooled air is. So there's rain falling back over here. You can see those darker clouds, showers, the cool air underneath that rushing southeast. That boundary is what we've been keying in on, and what, Gary, you were talking about earlier. Scott, I'm sure you mentioned it as well, but that boundary, which is really right above us right here, is an area that if a supercell gets connected to it, that's our biggest concern right now for one of these stronger tornadoes. So we're getting in position for that to keep everybody updated as we move through the afternoon. But again, you can really see just how it's warmer. I was north of that boundary about 10 minutes ago outside, and it felt significantly cooler than here, which, again, I mean, 68 degrees versus 75 or 76 degrees, not that big of a deal on a regular day, but on a day like today, that's a significant difference. And again, those types of storms, they can feed off of that temperature difference, and so that's what we're watching closely for. And the other thing to note, too, these cloud bases are very low. And I'll mention this as well, is that earlier we were under that cell whenever it's moving through St. Louis. There's a lot of deviant motion with that, meaning there's a lot of clouds at different levels that were moving in different directions, showing that wind shear. So while that storm likely did not produce an actual tornado in the moment, the National Weather Service staying ahead of that possibility, doing a great job keeping everybody advised that one could develop at any moment. But again, later on this afternoon, we will be with you throughout the rest of the day today here from the road and, of course, in the studio there. I got to get the buttons right, but we'll be with you for the rest of the day here as well, keeping a close watch on conditions along this boundary. Wherever this boundary settles, if it keeps rushing southbound, that's great news for St. Louis. If it does stall, then it'll be something we're going to be watching closely. But nevertheless, it's going to be within our region here today, so we'll keep a close watch. And I'll send it back to you guys in the studio.
Yeah, thanks, Lance, here. I know you're on it, and you're heading down 44 to give us a close eye on that. That's the reason for the tornado watch, right? Lance is on 44 trying to find where that boundary is specifically. And as he mentioned, all the motion at the low levels of the atmosphere and above the surface is the cause. And you can really see the fact that we'd had tornado warnings on the other side of the state at 4:30, 5 o'clock in the morning. And then we had a couple in these two counties, which, of course, are the only two that are not under a tornado watch. Rightfully so, because that boundary has sagged further south. I want to point out a couple of things, of course, as we talk about specifically with this tornado warning that's in place still for technically another 15 minutes. That doesn't mean that it won't continue to extend, but there are some signs, even as this one. I still want to watch this area specifically. Honestly, if I have to pick a spot right now, it would be closer to Des Peres and 270, simply because that looks like the motion that we have seen the others really develop. And honestly, we have such a straight line here where it's running into where these boundaries are. So that has kind of what has been happening earlier today, which has created some of the wind. And if nothing else, this wind is significant with upwards of 60-mile-an-hour wind gusts, and really is the same storm that was responsible for that damage that we showed you that was in Wildwood, right on the Wildwood-Ellisville edge. So want to make sure we got that all cleared up. So I got everybody checked off here in the Wildwood-Ellisville area. But what I want to point out is as we start to look at this all the way from Overland to Frontenac to Des Peres, this is another area that could be a cause for concern for areas to the south.
All right, so that is live coverage there from our content partner there in St. Louis, Missouri, KSDK there. All right, so we want to follow this story that we've been following. I say we, but Nate Morabito has been doing excellent work on this story for several years at this point, since 2022. So let me set you up here. So years after Charlotte City Manager pledged sweeping changes to ensure inclusivity with government contracting, our team discovered the city did not fully live up to one of those promises. Back in 2022, a Where's the Money investigation, the city excluded qualified small business owners and awarded more than $400,000 in government work to an uncertified talent coach who was friends with a top city executive. WCNC Charlotte's Nate Morabito is here in studio. You've been following up on this story. Fantastic work on this story. It's been 4 years since this initial story. Where are we now with this story?
Yeah, I mean, so the whole idea here is the city of Charlotte created a process, and it's a bit of a time-consuming process for minority, women, small business owners to try and get access to more government contracting work. And back in 2022, despite that process, they chose to do business with one specific talent coach who did not go through the process and basically overlook everyone else to give this person more than $400,000. So as a result of our investigation in that aftermath, people were outraged. Small business owners were calling City Hall. They really were demanding change. And as a result of that, this is what the city manager sent to city council members. It was basically a list of things, sweeping changes he was going to enact, most of which they've done.
Yeah.
But one in particular, and I've been following up on this for years because I think it's really important that if somebody says something, we make sure they do it.
Yeah.
Right? So one in particular was, the idea was that every single manager, there's hundreds of managers in the city, every single manager would receive annual inclusion training to understand the importance of this, to understand policy changes, to make sure that people were getting these kind of opportunities. And gosh, 2024, early 2024, I said, okay, show me proof that you all actually followed through on the training, as well as the other things. And they did provide that eventually. But initially, after a long wait, the idea was we never did that training. That's the response I got from the city. It took a long time to get to that point, but basically they said that training never happened. And I was like, what? You all said you were going to do the training every year, right? And this doesn't make sense. Like, why would they have not done the training? So we started moving forward with a story to figure out what's going on here. Went back and forth just to be extra careful to make sure the training didn't happen. And that's when the city said, well, we actually did a training. And it just so happens the training was a month after I asked about it. This was February 2024. But this is early this year that I'm just now finding out about this, that there was some kind of training that did in fact happen at one point. And so I'm providing information. Hundreds of people are trained during this inclusion training. I'm provided a document of exactly what the training was. I believe that training happened, right? There were hundreds of people that were trained. But we find out, the minority of those people that were trained were managers. And when you do the math, fewer than 25% of all managers have been trained thus far to date. So we're kind of wondering why. And I think that before we go any further here, why does this even matter? We're talking about, in this case, this was pandemic era money.
Yeah.
Given for services paid for by the city, delivered by someone else. There are tons of small business owners out there who are struggling, who are still recovering from the pandemic.
Yeah.
And they want to make sure they are part of this conversation. Whenever there is government work, they want to have the opportunity to put their name in the hat. And the city has said that's what they want to. here's what's at stake. Let's listen to LaPronda Span, who's a consultant. She helps businesses try to get government work.
It's a big deal because it could be life or death for a company. We saw what the pandemic did. Many people are still trying to recover even 5 years later, 3 years later from the pandemic. And it's important that many people can sustain not only the business, but their family, their households.
Now, LaPronda told me this is really important because most of what's going on here at the city, it's a people issue. And she believes people, managers, need to be trained and need to be retrained so that they're always prioritizing minority, women, and small business owners. I also, through my reporting, talked to Action NC Political Director Robert Dawkins, who is not shy of being critical of the city.
Oh, yeah.
And, you know, he will often say this to me and my investigative reporter friends in this market. You know, if it weren't for you all asking these questions, the public would not get the information. And here's kind of what he says in this situation. It's frustrating to him.
The only way that we ever get any transparency is to have an investigative reporter go back and start an investigation. That's a serious process flaw.
All right, so we're putting this story together, and I got to give the city credit. We said we want to interview the city manager, and they said we can't really fit him into the schedule, but what about a deputy city manager? And we interviewed this deputy city manager, Sean Heath, a very candid conversation. Said there really was no excuse for how long it took for this training to even occur. You know, this took almost 1.5 years after the city manager announced it to happen. And again, it just so happened after we asked for proof that all of a sudden they're going to do this training. And he also said this process was an evolution. They're comfortable with the fact that most managers weren't trained, and the reason is because they felt it would be better to only train the employees, manager or regular, who are involved in the government contracting procurement work. So you're going to hear from him tonight at 6 o'clock on WCNC Charlotte. You're going to hear more from Robert Dawkins. You're going to hear more from LaPronda Span. You can go to WCNC.com right now and read our full investigation. But it's such an important issue in our community, and this is something the city council has said that is a priority for them. And after our initial investigation, I mean, this was a big deal. The mayor said the city made a mistake. There was a lot of outcry to make sure that history wouldn't repeat itself. And people in the small business community believe this training is a critical role in making sure their government is held accountable to the promise they've made.
Just for you know, I love talking to you about your stories because for me, you know, I get a chance to see how the sausage is made. Followed up for years on this story. When did you get to the point you said, okay, now is a great time to get that update?
Yeah, I mean,
just
so
for folks out there.
I try to give everyone the benefit of the doubt, right? And I'm always filing public records requests. I want to understand and be 100% certain before we put something on the news. And when the city said that the training never happened, and I pushed back, and they said it still never happened, I said, this is a story, you know. I really gave them a lot of time to figure out what happened here.
Yeah.
And by the way, the city has gotten better with its public records requests. That's something that you request a public record, and they're supposed to give it to you in a reasonable amount of time. Well, for years, it's been a real struggle over there. And they've really made an emphasis on trying to be faster and more efficient in giving the public the records that we own. And in this case, it took way too long. I mean, everyone admits it took too long to get the records to us. And so you get to the point where you're like, well, we're moving forward on the story, but I'm not going to just put a headline out there. I'm going to figure out actually what happened. And that was earlier this year when we started figuring out, well, maybe a training did happen. Maybe it wasn't exactly what they said was going to happen, but they found a training that occurred. We think it's important to tell the public because at the end of the day, the city manager runs the city. The city council is the city manager's boss. And this was a big topic at a city council meeting in 2022. And we really felt it was important. And the public deserved to understand that just because they say they're going to do something doesn't mean it's always going to happen in the way they say they're going to do it and in the time they say they're going to do it.
Nate Morabito, awesome work, per usual. Not surprised by that. You can catch Nate's story. It's up on our website now.
Right now, WCNC.com.
But you can catch them live 5:30 and 6:15. Nate, as always, thank you for stopping by, man.
Appreciate you all for the support. Thanks.
Let's head to break. We'll be back here in just 2 minutes here on Live Impact News on WCNC Plus. Welcome back here on Live Impact News on WCNC Plus. I'm Nick Sertivant. All right, so moments ago, King Charles III and Queen Camilla arrived in Washington. This is a look here from moments ago. So they're here to mark the 250th anniversary of American independence from British rule and emphasize the close ties between the two countries. Now, this visit follows President Trump's visit to the UK in September for his second state visit, where he received a royal welcome there in the UK. So today's events, King Charles, Queen Camilla will be greeted. They were greeted, as you see here at Joint Base Andrews Air, Maryland, and they will. Actually, they just left, but they will go to the White House, meet the First Lady, meet President Trump. And then later, the Trumps and their visitors will attend a garden party at the British ambassador's house. But let's take a listen in to some of the moments from earlier. All right, so that is from moments ago, King Charles III and Queen Camilla. They will be at the White House, headed to the White House as we speak. This is a live look at the White House. All right, so in just a few minutes, we are expected to hear from FBI Director Kash Patel, also the DOJ, regarding the incident at the White House Correspondents' Dinner. But let's take a break. We'll have that for you once that comes up. NBC special report, but let's take a break. We'll be back here in just 2 minutes here on Live Impact News on WCNC Plus.
Hi folks, welcome back to Live Impact News. I'm Vanessa Rufus, taking over for Nick Sturdivant here in the Live Impact News studio. I want to take you now live out to this DOJ press conference. As you can see, we're still waiting for folks to take the podium here, but it's a joint FBI DOJ press conference regarding that shooting at the White House Correspondents' Dinner over the weekend. The latest news in this case that we know is that the suspect is now charged with attempting to assassinate the president. We don't know if officials here, when they take over and give us this press conference, will share more than that. However, we are standing by, giving you a live look at that feed. We will continue to monitor this in the background, and as we see anyone head towards that podium, we'll bring that to you here on Live Impact News. Meantime, let's go ahead and get a quick check of the forecast. Another delightful day here. I know we had a little bit of precipitation over the weekend. We'll definitely take that. Is more on the way? Well, let's find out.
Hi, this is Larry Sprinkle checking those weather impacts for the entire week. What's good about this week? We're not talking about any 80-degree days, anything above that. Sunshine for the afternoon. We have a couple opportunities for some showers. In fact, there's about 3 chances we'll have rain for the entire week. And here's the way it shapes up tomorrow. A few isolated rain showers, certainly not a washout. I think Wednesday is a decent day for a decent amount of rainfall. We could get maybe in some spots up to about a half an inch. We certainly need a lot more than that. And then on Saturday, we do see another chance of some scattered showers out there. So at least 3 days this week, we're talking about the potential for some much needed rain across the entire area. As we take you into the afternoon, we're talking about temperatures in the 70s today. Now, we should be in the mid 70s. We're only going to be in the low 70s for the afternoon. Even around 8 o'clock tonight, temperatures will be under clear skies in the mid 60s at that time. Once again, the average high is 76 this time of the year. Over the next several days, and we mentioned this a minute ago, we're talking about temperatures right around average or below for every day this week. Once again, the average high is 76, the mildest day of the week. The average high is 76. That's where we'll be on Wednesday. Then we take you all the way to the end of the week, back in the low 70s on Thursday and Friday. So that's some good news. No 80-degree temperatures anytime soon across the entire region. Average high 76 degrees. Our high today 73. As we take you right into the middle of the afternoon, we'll be in the low 70s. About 9 o'clock, if you're out and about for whatever reason, afternoon, take a stroll outside. We'll be in the mid-60s across the entire region at that time. That's the good news. Rain chances for the next 5 days. We'll take you into the upcoming weekend. We mentioned this, that there is a few isolated shower possibilities on Tuesday. Not a washout. Wednesday is that day we're going to see clouds out there. It'll be mild temperatures with rain likely. There may be a stray thunderstorm or two. Dry weather on Thursday and Friday. We head into the upcoming weekend. You got plans. I would say the best day for the upcoming weekend with lots of sunshine is going to be on Sunday, because Saturday is that day that we do see the opportunity for some scattered showers and maybe a stray thunderstorm. We put the chance in about 40%, and that would be on Saturday across the region. Let's go ahead and check that Jerry Hunt Supercenter 7-day forecast. Shaping up to be a beautiful day today, mainly sunny skies, just a few fair weather clouds, high close to 73 degrees. Tomorrow afternoon will be in the low 70s with about a 30% coverage of showers. And once again, we do mention that Wednesday it is going to be a cloudy day. Periods of rain in the forecast, not expecting any drenching rain, but certainly the opportunity for some much needed rain showers. We'll hit about 76 degrees on Wednesday. Sunshine, scattered clouds on Thursday. Thursday's high temperature right around 73 degrees. Friday is going to be another below average temperature day. We're going to be right around 72 degrees with a low that morning of 51. Now, as we head into the upcoming weekend, we have that one day, and that's Saturday, with clouds out there. And with that cloud cover, this air mass is going to be very cool. We're talking about temperatures in the upper 60s. So that means we're going to limit the opportunity for any strong storms. I think it's just going to be mainly some scattered light rain showers around the region on Saturday, with a low that morning of 49. So we start at 49 in the morning, 69 in the afternoon. And then for Sunday afternoon, after starting in the mid-40s, temperatures still below average at about 71 degrees across the entire area. So when we're talking about a 7-day stretch with temperatures below average or right around average, that's some really good news considering how warm it was the past several days, and several opportunities. So much needed rainfall across the entire region. That's your forecast. I'm Larry Sprinkle. Hope you have a nice day.
All right, so there you have it, folks. And as you were seeing, we gave you a little bit of detail on this update we're expecting in just a few moments. Live look at the podium there, as we're expecting the FBI and DOJ to give an update regarding that shooting at the White House Correspondents' Dinner from over the weekend. We mentioned that the suspect in this case, Cole Thomas Allen, had his first court appearance today, and within the last several minutes or so, we did hear from officials that there are going to be charges of attempting to assassinate the president amongst the charges that he is potentially going to be facing here. So we're going to watch this once again as we get more activity there at the podium. We'll bring it to you live here on Live Impact News. Meantime, another quick break. We'll be back in 2 minutes with more. Thanks for sticking with us. Hi, folks. Welcome back to Live Impact News. Just wanted to let you know we do continue to keep an eye on that podium there for the FBI DOJ press conference regarding that shooting from over the weekend at the White House Correspondents' Dinner. Within the last couple of moments or so, we saw just a little bit of activity. You could see that they've got poster boards up there. They just turned those over. And essentially what we're seeing here is a plethora of weapons. We're unsure exactly what the messaging will be regarding this, but we can tell you that the person in this case is now being charged with attempting to assassinate the president, and we are expecting folks from the FBI as well as the DOJ. So we believe the Director Kash Patel will speak, and the Acting Attorney General Todd Blanche will speak in just a few moments. So bear with us. We're going to keep an eye on this some more. Meantime, we've got various feeds that we've been watching across the area. Of course, as we get to our 3-box here, we've got for you that DOJ press conference. In the bottom left now, top left, you can see the King and Queen are expected to arrive at the White House any moment now. King Charles and Queen Camilla arriving in Washington today, helping to mark the 250th anniversary of American independence from British rule. And also, we know there will be some sort of emphasis on the close ties between the two countries. We were actually going to get over to KTSK, but we just now have this live feed from the DOJ press conference. Let's listen in right now.
Right. As you all know, an act of violence occurred at a gathering that symbolizes something fundamental to our system.
All right, folks, we actually have an NBC special news report of this happening as we speak. Let's pivot over to that right now.
This is an NBC News special report. Here's Tom Yamas.
And good day. We are coming on the air as officials from the Justice Department, FBI, hold a news conference after Cole Thomas Allen was charged with attempting to assassinate President Trump at Saturday's White House Correspondents' Dinner. This news conference has started. Let's listen into the Acting Attorney General.
Without hesitation, and did their jobs as they were trained to do. Secret Service agents promptly tackled and detained the suspect, Cole Thomas Allen. The president and all the protectees and participants at the dinner were safe. One brave officer was injured and is receiving care and has been released from the hospital. I want to make this clear. This man was a floor above the ballroom with hundreds of federal agents between him and the President of the United States. The Department of Justice approaches incidents like this with urgency and clarity of purpose. Violence has no place in civic life. It cannot and will not be used to disrupt democratic institutions or intimidate those who serve them, and it certainly cannot continue to be used against the President of the United States. We are investigating this matter fully. We will apply the law fairly, and we will ensure that accountability is swift and certain. But we also should recognize what did not happen. Law enforcement did not fail. They did exactly what they are trained to do. This was not an accident. It was the result, as we know now, of preparation. But the men and women who protected us that night were trained, professional, and had an enduring commitment to the rule of law. Today, the Department of Justice filed 3 federal charges in United States District Court against Cole Thomas Allen. The first count is attempted assassination of the President of the United States. This count is punishable by up to life in prison. The second count is interstate transportation of a firearm to commit a felony. This is punishable by up to 10 years in prison. And the third count is discharge of a firearm during a crime of violence, which is punishable by a mandatory minimum term of imprisonment of 10 years, a maximum of life, and the 10 years is consecutive to any other sentence imposed. Just to go through very quickly the timeline, which many of you in this room already know. The defendant, Allen, made a hotel reservation at the Washington Hilton for April 24th through April 26th. On April 21st of this year, he traveled by train from Los Angeles to Chicago and then from Chicago to Washington, D.C. On April 24th, he arrived in Washington, D.C. at approximately 1 o'clock in the afternoon and checked into the Washington Hilton. Approximately at 8:40 on the night of April 25th, Allen approached a security checkpoint on the terrace level of the hotel, which is again a floor above where the dinner was taking place. He ran through the magnetometer holding a long gun. As he did so, U.S. Secret Service personnel assigned to the checkpoint heard a loud gunshot. One Secret Service officer was shot in the chest, but was wearing a ballistic vest that worked. This heroic officer who was hit fired 5 times at Allen, who was not shot but fell to the ground and was promptly arrested. I want to thank everybody who worked tirelessly on Saturday, Sunday, and continuing today. This includes members of the FBI, and Director Patel is going to address that in a minute. It includes members of the Metropolitan Police Department who were immediately on the scene, the chief, the mayor, to make sure that law enforcement was available to do their jobs and had all the tools they needed to do so. And lastly, the United States Attorney's Office here in D.C., our U.S. Attorney Jeanine Pirro and her team. A prosecutor stayed up all night long, didn't sleep all day yesterday, making sure that we got what we needed from all over the country. It included search warrants in California, search warrants here in D.C., multiple interviews that have been conducted already of witnesses and of family members of the charged individual, and continue to work hard today. This investigation is ongoing. It's not complete. A lot of the information that the media is hearing through leaks or sources, some of it is true, some of it is not true, and at the right time you will hear information from us as appropriate. I'd like to ask our U.S. Attorney Jeanine Pirro to say a few words, and then followed by Director Patel. Thank you.
Thank you, Mr. Attorney General. Cole Allen's journey of accountability in the criminal justice system starts today. Todd Blanche just indicated to you the charges. Those charges are only 3 charges that are in the complaint that has been presented in federal district court about an hour ago. There will be additional charges as this investigation continues to unfold. But make no mistake, this was an attempted assassination of the President of the United States, with the defendant making clear what his intent was. And that intent was to bring down as many of the high-ranking cabinet officials as he could. This is the kind of situation that we cannot tolerate. And as the Attorney General has just indicated, it could have been so much worse, but for the reality that we had the Secret Service as well as the Metropolitan Police Department and the FBI. Now, the facts make it very clear what this intent was. You may recall that it was on March 2nd that the president indicated that he would be attending this public event at the Hilton. And on April 6th, that's when Cole Allen first made a hotel reservation at the Washington Hilton for 3 nights, the 24th, the 25th, and the 26th. It was on April 21st that he traveled all the way from the West Coast, from his home near L.A. He gets to Chicago on April 23rd, and has been indicated he arrives in D.C. on the 24th, and he checks into the hotel at about 3 p.m. He stays overnight. He is very much aware that the President and the First Lady entered the ballroom at 8 p.m. And it was at 8:40 that he made a decision to rush the ballroom. And thank goodness, law enforcement, the Secret Service, was able to prevent him from getting into that ballroom. He was not injured other than some kind of scrape on his knee. Now, as indicated, these are the weapons that the defendant had on his person. You can see that's a 12-gauge pump-action Mossberg shotgun. It's a .38 semi-automatic. He had at least 3 knives and all kinds of paraphernalia. So any suggestion that he wasn't there to do harm is absurd. We will prove when he purchased these guns. They were purchased in California. Why is that relevant? It is relevant because he crossed interstate lines with those firearms, and those are the firearms that he used on the night of the 25th, or attempted to use at the very least. Now, the manifesto also makes clear about his expected rules of engagement. You know, you can look at it and read it, and it may seem kind of la, but at the end, make no mistake, he says, I am targeting the administration officials. They are my targets, and I'm prioritizing from the top down, the highest ranking from the lowest. And I will not hesitate to get involved in any kind of encounter with anyone who blocks me from the president. Now, finally, let me say one thing. Within days of the president nominating me to be the United States Attorney for the District of Columbia, I was at the scene of a double homicide, where one Elias Rodriguez crossed state lines from Chicago with a firearm to commit a felony in the district. He's now indicted for the murder of two individuals, Laron Lashinsky and Sarah Milgram, here in Washington. Not long after that, another individual, Ramanullah Lockenwall, crossed state lines, again with a firearm, with intent to commit a felony here in Washington. He traveled from the state of Washington. He is now indicted with the murder of Sarah Beckstrom, a National Guardsman, and the attempted murder of National Guard Andrew Wolf. Today, we have Cole Allen, another individual, charged with crossing state lines coming from California with a firearm with the intent to commit a felony here in the district. Let this be a message to anyone who thinks that Washington, D.C. is the place to act out political violence. And if you are willing to do so with a firearm and cross state lines, we will find you, we will track your steps from the inception of your plan, and we will prosecute you to the fullest extent of the law. Washington, D.C. is not the place to travel to commit acts of violence. The Constitution and the laws of the United States permit us to register our views through our voices and our votes. What they don't permit is making your views known through violence, especially violence directed at the President of the United States. This is anti-democratic at its core.
Thank you, Judge. Excuse me. Thank you, General. This one hits a little differently. We were all there. Many of you were there. Many of you watching were there as well. The president was there. The vice president was there. The cabinet was there. And what you saw, described by the general and the U.S. attorney, is absolutely true. The president spoke on late Saturday evening with the message of unity and a backing of law enforcement, and we have followed through on that message of unity and the effectuation of law enforcement across this country. This FBI is grateful to the United States Secret Service, the Department of Homeland Security, and our interagency partners, including the Metropolitan Police Department, for swiftly jumping into action. All of us on there put us in a unique position, but all of us also acted uniquely. The Washington field office jumped into action immediately, sending a mobile command center to the scene, along with our evidence response technicians, who showed up in speedy fashion to make sure we could collect the evidence that the prosecutors and the department needed to make this announcement today. Also on scene, you were told about the brave heroics of the United States Secret Service and other members of law enforcement, and that should be celebrated by every single American. They did exactly what they were trained to do. They stopped a massive attack from becoming even worse. They stood in the way, they safeguarded America, and they should be nothing but applauded for their bravery and their dedication to their mission and their selfless sacrifice to this country. The FBI, along with standing up mobile command units, evidence tech response team, and Washington SWAT on scene, also established our NC3, our National Crisis Coordination Center, almost immediately. And almost immediately in parallel, we stood up our command center at the Washington field office under ADIC Darren Cox's leadership. Throughout the evening, we immediately began working with our Department of Justice partners to find the evidence necessary to effectuate the legal process necessary and enter into the suspect's room at the Washington Hilton successfully and lawfully and obtain the relevant evidence for exploitation. That was on scene. Back at the headquarters division and the Washington field office, we were coordinating a national scale investigation that literally spanned from coast to coast. As you heard, FBI agents, along with the interagency, were immediately dispatched to the suspect's home in California, where we conducted interviews that provided critical information about this horrific attack. We also dispatched investigators and agents to New London, Connecticut, where we conducted further interviews that provided necessary information that you will find in this criminal complaint, as the United States Attorney has just laid out. While officers were working diligently through the night to conduct those interviews, we were also conducting interviews of witnesses on scene. Those interviews are ongoing. As you know, there was almost 2,000 people there. We are sifting through and prioritizing who to talk to, and we will get to each and every one of you with any bit of relevant information. Again, we ask everybody who has any relevant information, like I did on Saturday night with the president, 1-800-CALL-FBI. Any piece of information is information we want to have and must receive. On top of the on-scene response by this FBI, the headquarters response, and the Washington field office response, the FBI flipped on its enterprise-wide response to this critical incident. What does that mean? We dispatched fixed-wing assets across the country so that we could immediately transport evidence that was acquired in California and Connecticut and sent it to our laboratories in Quantico for analysis. We collected the shell casings on scene, including the firearms and the weapons that the judge talked about. Those were also sent to our Quantico laboratories for immediate analysis. America should be proud that this FBI acted with the urgency that was needed for the moment that we had to answer. The president rightly said that we will act in a unified fashion, and it's because of President Trump's leadership and backing of the blue, every single person in law enforcement that I stood with into late evening hours on Saturday, early evening hours on Sunday, and all day yesterday and today are thrilled to wear the badge and defend this country. Each and every one of them deserves our thanks, and I encourage everyone listening to go out there and shake the hand of a federal agent or police officer and say thank you for doing their job. Thank you for training endlessly to make sure they meet the mission requirements. And for me, as the director of the FBI, I want to thank our headquarters components for working diligently with our prosecutors and make sure that the American public knows it's not just federal agents that do this work. It's our intelligence analysts, our support staff, our laboratories, our fixed-wing assets, our critical incident response groups, our hostage rescue teams. Agents sprung into action, got out of bed, and haven't slept since. These prosecutors haven't slept since, and I promise you they're not going to be sleeping. They are going to give you every piece of evidence. As the journal said, we will make public, when appropriate, to protect the integrity of this investigation, to make sure that due process is served, and we will meet the highest standards of the Constitution, as we always do. And that is when we will continue to disclose information. I know the public has a yearning for information, but just remind yourself of how much information you have already received, how transparent this administration has been. In less than 48 hours, you know almost every single thing we know. And what we have not told you yet, we will tell you in short order. So once again, from me, as director of the FBI, I want to thank the interagency. I want to thank the United States Secret Service and their director, Mark Wayne Mullen, the Secretary of Homeland Security, the Attorney General of the United States, Attorney Pirro, and Ada Cox for springing into action on a night that should have been celebrating free speech, but we will be doing it again shortly, as the President said, and we look forward to seeing you all there.
Pierre.
Two questions, please. Beyond the evidence and what the judge described as the manifesto, what other evidence can you point to that tells us that the president was the primary target of the suspect?
So we're a day and a half into the investigation. As we talked about earlier, we were able to get multiple devices from various locations, the hotel room and also his where he lived in California. We have started that process. There's nothing more that would be appropriate to share at this time until we have thoroughly gone through it, which we're doing, and we'll share that information as appropriate in the future. Second question, go ahead.
Beyond the assassination attempts against President Trump, you had someone try to burn down the mansion where the governor lives in Pennsylvania. You had those state lawmakers attacked in Minnesota. You've had 2 Israeli embassy staff members murdered in the city here. You had the Charlie Kirk assassination. You had the National Guardsman killed in the city. Can you, each of you, describe the current threat environment and what DOJ's stance is about it?
Well, you just described the current threat environment pretty accurately, which is that the political violence and rhetoric has got to stop. And that's something President Trump said right after the incident on Saturday night. It's something that Carolyn Leavitt talked about a couple hours ago. It is something that is, when you have a president who and many people in this room, if we're going to be honest about it, has done as well. They're just as guilty as a lot of people on X. When you have reporters, when you have media just being overly critical and calling the president horrible names for no reason and without evidence, without proof, it shouldn't surprise us that this type of rhetoric takes place. If you look at what it appears that this defendant had in his past, we're talking about somebody who is college educated, who has a job, who is otherwise living his life, and we'll find out more about him, as I expect, in the coming days and weeks. But he chose to do what he did, and so our threat environment is we are ready. I mean, I'm not going to go through what Director Patel just talked about with the way we responded, but this was something that we will always be prepared for, and it's sad that it has to happen, but it's not a new thing, unfortunately. Okay, same.
Have you been able to determine whether the gunman fired shots? If so, how many shots he fired, and whose bullet hit the agent?
We want to get that right, so we're still looking at that. It appears, and I don't want to overstate because we are still looking at this, that there were five shots that law enforcement fired. We have all the evidence is being examined very carefully and expeditiously, and we'll know more soon. We do believe that, as the complaint lays out, that the suspect, that the defendant fired it out of his shotgun, and we know that happened. But as far as getting into exacting ballistics, I'm not going to do that today because it's still being looked at and finalized.
Thank you for taking my question. You personally have called for a construction of this ballroom at the White House. The president has called for this as well. Today, the National Trust president put out a statement, says that they're grateful that everybody's okay, but, and I quote, "We are not planning to voluntarily dismiss our lawsuit, which endangers no one, and which respectfully ask the administration to follow the law. Ballroom construction is continuing unabated until June 5th at the earliest because the injunction is on hold." Where does the Justice Department go from here? And then I have a follow-up on that.
Well, we filed a motion today asking the court to do what the plaintiffs refused to do. We absolutely believe that there is no better example of why this ballroom is necessary, aside from all the very positive things the ballroom will bring to this country and to Washington, D.C., than what happened on Saturday night. You guys, many of you all were there. That's one of the only places in D.C. that you can hold an event like that due to its size and the structure of what we need. So we're basically stuck at this point in the city with having an event like that at a hotel, so underneath a ton of hotel rooms. And so the fact that we, aside from the fact that the ballroom is spectacular, it's going to be beautiful, it's going to make this country look great every time it's used, it's also a meaningful safety issue. And so I very much wish that the plaintiffs and their counsel would take a different view, but if they don't, we are going to continue to fight in court like we have been, and hopefully the judges at the D.C. Circuit Court will do the right thing. Beck.
Are you aware of...
Not you, the red.
Thank you. Are you investigating connections that Cole Allen allegedly had to left-wing groups? I think one is called the Wide Awakes, reportedly.
Yes. Of course we're investigating that. Now you.
Are you aware of his video game development past, including a potential shooter-style RPG game?
I've seen the news reports that talk about that. I think that the positive and negatives of this type of case is that there's a lot of people investigating this man right now, including the FBI. But the only investigations that truly matter in the court of law are the ones that Director Patel and his men and women are doing. So we'll wait for them to do that and get an answer.
Follow up, just really quick. Do you know anything about his alleged Christian faith past, because he said something about it in the manifesto?
I have read reports in the news, and I've read reports that say various things regarding his views of Christianity, his views in the past of Christianity, and I'm certainly not going to speak to news reports. I will wait, as I hope all of you would, for the investigation to continue until we actually have answers. Yeah.
Just a little technical question. You mentioned that you guys so far
far you think that Allen fired at least one shot. That doesn't say that in the affidavit yet, so I'm just curious if you can explain the discharging of weapon charge at this point.
Well, he's charged with violating 924C, discharge of a firearm during a crime of violence. So by definition, that charge means that it was discharged. I can tell you from what I know, with the understanding that we're a day and a half in, that this is the gun that he discharged. Yeah. And as those of us that have ever shot one of these know, what happens when you shoot that is the casing stays inside the firearm, and then if you reload it, it pops it out. My understanding is that it was inside the firearm, but hadn't been ejected, which means that it hadn't been pulled back again. But again, I want folks to understand, I'm the acting attorney general. I'm not on the ground doing the investigation, so I'm telling you what I've been told, and we'll, if that information changes, I'm sure that we'll let you know. Yeah.
Just want to ask you about this letter that you posted yesterday that's sent from Brett Shumate to the plaintiffs in that lawsuit. It says that the Washington Hilton is, quote, demonstrably unsafe for the President of the United States. It said that with the ballroom, that Trump will no longer need to venture beyond the safety of the White House perimeter. Just engaging with those lines, was there an assessment in advance of the dinner that the Hilton was demonstrably unsafe? And if so, why was President Trump allowed to attend it? And then separately, just the idea that by building the ballroom that President Trump wouldn't need to go outside of the confines of the White House. I mean, is that something that the American people, should find acceptable, that the president would have to be, for major events, confined to the White House? It seems like kind of a castle situation.
That is obviously not what he means by that. And the fact that question comes with respect to President Trump is laughable in the extreme. I mean, laughable in the extreme. You have a president who willingly speaks with you guys multiple times a day, I would say 7 days a week. He is active all over the country. I think with that, keeping it to the four corners of that statement, when he says demonstrably, it's demonstrated by what happened on Saturday night. So that doesn't mean that the Secret Service would ever let the president go into an unsafe environment. I know that the director of the Secret Service will be focused on making sure that we always keep him safe. And by the way, as we said before, and as anybody that was in that room knows, we were safe. We were safe. We heard a lot of loud noises that at the time many of us thought could be guns going off. It was mostly plates falling because of the staff, understandably, were running. So my reaction to that is I'll leave anything with respect to security up to the great men and women of the Secret Service. But when we talk about having an environment like the ballroom, it's an environment like what you saw last night. So an environment where you have a unique blend of cabinet members, leadership of this country, leadership of Congress, reporters and members of the public coming together for an event like that. That's different than other public-facing situations, which I have no doubt President Trump will continue to do, as he said he would on Saturday night. Yeah.
Thank you. Is there, for FBI Director Piscatell, is there any other credible threats at this time related to events in the city, including King Charles? And then separately, the manifesto, I don't really want to give too much weight to this, did mention your name in it as someone that they maybe were not targeting. Do you want to kind of elaborate on that? And then also the political motivations there.
As to the latter, no. As to the former, the FBI and the interagency is constantly evaluating intelligence provided to us by interagency collection methods. Our partners in the federal and state and local levels, we are constantly relaying that information to the White House, to the Attorney General, to the United States Attorney, specifically here in D.C. And we will always assess each piece of intelligence and base it on the credibility that it was received and give it the due weight that it has. But as the U.S. Attorney has stated, and as President Trump's task force for Washington, D.C. has shown, we have reduced crime in this city by historic levels, and we will continue to do so, and we will continue to safeguard the men and women that call Washington, D.C. their home.
All right, just a couple more.
Acting Attorney General, in paragraph 14 of the complaint today, it says that the suspect fell, and you said that he was tackled. I just want to see if we can try to make sure we understand.
Well, I think that both can be true.
Yeah.
Okay.
And I would rely on the complaint because that was sworn to by an agent and not by the words out of the acting attorney general, who most certainly was not there. But I think both can be true.
All right. Well, the U.S. attorney yesterday also mentioned that one of the charges possibly would be for assault on an officer, and I noticed today it's a different charge. Is this because you've determined that what he shot didn't actually strike the officer?
We're still looking at that, and I think that's something that you'll hear about in the coming days as we know the answer to that. It doesn't legally matter in that situation, but when after an event like this happens, not surprisingly, there's initial charges that we consider. Then you have the U.S. Attorney's team and the FBI looking through the evidence and figuring out what's the best thing to do, and that's what you have. Right? Just one more question. Yeah.
I have two quick questions. One,
All right, two questions.
I just wanted to clarify. You said the one officer fired their weapon 5 times. Was that the only officer who discharged a firearm?
I want to be very careful in answering that question because this is when you do ballistics. Evidentiary collection and research, it is very complicated. So when you fire a bullet, the bullet ends up somewhere. Sometimes you find it, sometimes you don't. And so from that, with that qualifier, we believe right now that there was 5 shots fired from the same firearm. But there's a team of folks looking at this that are experts, and the evidence collection team that were in that area of the hotel where the shots were fired will work all night. They have the evidence they collected, but it's not an exact science from the standpoint that, for example, the buckshot, when that shot, it scatters everywhere. Sometimes it just disappears, actually, depending on where it hits. So you don't have to, hopefully with that qualifier, that's where we are right now.
Question about the timeline, sir.
Hold on.
I just wanted to ask what law enforcement has learned about why he was targeting President Trump. Do you guys believe he was upset about a certain policy or decision by the president?
The complaint lays out what I think is described as a manifesto, which is something that he allegedly sent to many folks, his family. That's what we have so far as his motivation. As the U.S. Attorney said a few minutes ago, what is clear from the complaint and from what we have so far is he was targeting President Trump. He described that in his manifesto. He was targeting administration officials. He described that. But as far as us understanding additional motivation, that's for the FBI and law enforcement. All right, thanks a lot, guys. I appreciate it. Thank you.
The Amtrak security measures, will there be any announcement about Amtrak security?
We've just been listening to a news conference there at the Department of Justice alongside the FBI about the issue and the incident that happened Saturday night at the White House Correspondents' Dinner. I want to bring in our national law enforcement intelligence correspondent, Tom Winter. Tom, we've now seen the unsealed indictment. We've learned some more about this manifesto, about the timeline as well, when he purchases his hotel room, the suspect in this case, and then heading over to Chicago, from Chicago taking another train and getting to Washington, D.C., and then essentially sitting and waiting for this dinner to get started.
Yeah, and on that sitting and waiting point, one of the things I found interesting, Tom, was a statement made by the U.S. Attorney Jeanine Pirro. She was talking about how the fact that he waited until Donald Trump was in the ballroom. And I noticed in the criminal complaint that it mentions that it notes specifically that this was a televised event and that it was at 8:40 that he decided to come down and also schedule that email to be sent out where this manifesto was included. So I wonder if they've come across any evidence that he was either streaming or watching in his hotel room the proceedings. We'll have to follow up on that. To your point here, the timeline. The president announces he'll attend the White House Correspondents' Dinner on March 2nd. By April 6th, Allen is making that hotel reservation at the Washington Hilton, where, of course, this event was occurring or was to occur. April 21st, he travels from L.A. to Chicago by train. He then leaves Chicago on the 23rd and arrives in D.C. on the 24th at approximately 1 p.m. Shortly after that, within several hours, according to the criminal complaint, he checks into the hotel. We know from the writings he left behind, he had some specific criticisms about security that would be very clear that he had been traveling around the property, the Hilton property, potentially scoping it out. And then, he approaches that direction running, as we've now seen in that video, at a high rate of speed. We're watching it here as he goes through, coming from left to right, and then the agents fire at him. Apparently, approximately 5 rounds, according to the acting Attorney General Todd Blanche, though he says they're still doing the ballistics, and that they also believe that the suspect fired a round from his shotgun because they found that shotgun shell casing still inside the shotgun. If he had a chance to reload, he would have pumped that shotgun and that casing would have come out, but it does indicate that he perhaps fired at least 1 round. So that's the latest we have. Folks have asked, you're looking at the shotgun there. We look at all the weapons, actually. It's 2 guns in total. The shotgun referenced by the acting Attorney General. Then we have a 38 caliber semi-automatic pistol that he had, as well as a host of knives, over 3 knives apparently in a backpack. You see in that video, he goes through there, he's in dark clothing. Now we're looking at this video where he's on the ground, not in any clothing. That is security protocol. They would have immediately stripped him of his clothes to make sure he didn't have any sort of explosive devices on him, any additional weapons. So that's just part of the procedure. Now looking at some of the other pieces of the firearms and the knives that he brought with him as well. Again, all of this according to federal prosecutors here. The 38 caliber semi-automatic pistol on the left, the guns on the right. We have this writing and we can take a look at it, Tom. One of the reasons why I think they're able to charge today, charge specifically about the President of the United States, because he doesn't say overtly in here that he wanted to kill Donald Trump, but he does say administration officials, they are targets prioritized from highest ranking to lowest. Well, Tom, as you and I both know, the highest ranking member of the Trump administration is, of course, the President of the United States himself. So that could be why they're able to apply that charge here. And that's really what we know. It's only a 7-page document that was released today in court, and we do expect an indictment. This will go before a federal grand jury here in the next couple of weeks as they wrap up this investigation.
I will point you, though, to the 7th, I think it's the 7th paragraph, if you will, the 7th sentence in this manifesto. He calls the White House Correspondents' Dinner, quote, "This is the first real opportunity I've had to do something about it," essentially to allegedly go after the president here. It's going to be very tough for his defense attorney to get by that one, along with all the other evidence they have on this man.
Yeah, that's exactly right. I mean, the statement here, we've seen over the course of several of the other assassination attempts against Donald Trump, which is an incredible, and I mean that in all the worst ways, a statement for me to make. We've had 3 now attempted assassinations, according to the Justice Department, across 2 administrations. Of course, 2 of those while he was a candidate, 1 now as president. In the first one, the initial incident in Butler, Pennsylvania, Thomas Matthew Crooks, that incident, we really had no social media information whatsoever. There were no writings that were left behind. Still a little bit unclear as to what was in the mindset of that shooter. Here, Tom, there is, to your point, nothing for the imagination and nothing up for interpretation. It is very clear what he wanted to do. He obviously had a thought process, and we're seeing somebody who's highly educated by all accounts and based on his history with the schools that he's attended, with his background, really had written this out and thought this out. It's not a thought, though, I think most of us have.
Yeah, and I want to make a quick correction here. I called it an indictment. It is a criminal complaint at this point. It's the affidavit in support of the criminal complaint. Senior Justice reporter Ryan Riley covers all things DOJ and FBI for us. Ryan, there is this strange section here where he's listing the potential targets, and we should note there is a section here, towards the end of the manifesto where he says, "I would still go through most everyone here to get to the targets if it were absolutely necessary, on the basis that most people, quote, chose to attend a speech." And he uses, a couple of attack words here for the president. But I really hope it doesn't come to that, essentially saying that everyone in that room was going to be a target in some sense if he couldn't get to the principles he was after.
Yeah, he's definitely justifying a lot of information there and saying saying essentially what he would go after. But I do think one thing that will be interesting about this case going forward is that it's happening in D.C. And there's been a number of incidents involving grand juries that have not gone along with charges previously. I don't think that's going to fall into this category necessarily, but I think that that's something that could be considered in the back of prosecutors' pockets, whether or not they're going to think they're going to run into trouble with any of these juries happening in D.C. because juries have been skeptical. There have been instances where the federal grand juries have not trusted the information that the Trump administration have posed before. There was that instance infamously with 6 sitting members of Congress who the Justice Department tried to charge who did not end up being indicted. So juror skepticism, I think, is going to be a potential ongoing issue, potentially in this case going forward. But obviously, there's a lot of information that was included in that. And Todd Blanche was really emphasizing this was a success story by law enforcement, that they stopped him there. So despite, this individual's proclaimed weaknesses, or what he thought he identified as weaknesses in the Secret Service protection system there, what he was emphasizing is that a lot of law enforcement officers did act, heroically that day, and were able to stop this threat. This was someone who, as you mentioned, was sort of being able to justify going through whoever he had to go through, allegedly, to get to the end potential target there, which appeared to be the president of the United States. And now we see that reflected in that top charge, the attempted assassination of Donald Trump for the 3rd time.
Yeah, Ryan, stand by for us. I'm joined now by NBC News legal analyst Danny Savalos. Danny, we know there's a series of court hearings this week and in the coming weeks. The suspect has yet to enter a plea yet. He was in court today in front of a judge.
Yeah, the reason why we have a few dates coming up is, number one, when it comes to the bail issue, if you're a defendant, it's a complicated case. You can ask for up to 3 days in order to prepare for the bail hearing. And yes, his defense is doing the best they can, but the reality is whether it was held today or in 3 days, this is what we call a presumption case. It's not likely he's going to be released pending trial. It may surprise many folks to realize that under the Bail Reform Act, the presumption is supposed to be released. But with these charges, that presumption flips, and it's assumed, essentially, unless proven otherwise, that no condition or set of conditions will either keep the public safe or ensure that this person shows up for trial.
All right, Danny Savalos, we appreciate that. I want to bring in our White House correspondent, Monica Alba. The president has had a number of high profiles this week, events this week. Is the president's security being looked at in light of what's happened this weekend?
They are taking a look at everything involved here, Tom, and it starts with a meeting that the White House Chief of Staff, Susie Wiles, is convening with the leadership of United States Secret Service and DHS to basically assess what, if anything, needs to change for future major events. Certainly, these are conversations that took place when then candidate Donald Trump was the subject of that assassination attempt in Butler, Pennsylvania, at that rally, which, of course, was outdoors compared to this indoor event in a hotel. We know that they did make some alterations. They did make some significant changes to how the president would appear in public. Again, back then, that was before he was in office for this 2nd time. Now that he is the president, he even has a higher level of security and resources dedicated to him. But they are going to have a meeting, we're told, to basically assess and make any decision about whether anything in the next couple of days or the next couple of weeks needs to be adjusted. Of course, this is a president who does travel for domestic trips. He goes overseas quite frequently. In fact, he has a pretty high-profile visit to Beijing just a couple of weeks from now. So they're going to take a look at everything holistically, we understand, and then make those determinations. But because of the sensitive nature, Tom, of how some of these security decisions are made, it's not necessarily the case that we're going to learn about some of the changes that could be made behind the scenes with some of those postures, with some of those protocols. But there will be something that we will be able to just see because it will become apparent, whether they change the president's schedule, whether they decide that he won't be a part of some more high-profile events in the coming months. We know he has expressed a willingness to be a part of some major sporting events. That's something he has done for the last couple of months pretty regularly at a pretty frequent cadence. So will he continue to do that? Will that change? Is there anything there that's going to shift? And also, there are going to be some major and massive events around the America 250 celebration, of course, the anniversary of America's independence this summer, that the president is very directly involved in terms of the planning and his attendance. So will anything shift there? But in the immediate, we have our first case study here over the next couple of days, because the president and the first lady are about to welcome King Charles and Queen Camilla for a 4-day state visit. They are going to be here in Washington. They will be at the White House later today and tomorrow, and they are also traveling to New York City and to Virginia. But in terms of the events of the next few hours with them, we are told, and Buckingham Palace has said the same, that the visit is proceeding as planned, that they aren't going to shift anything, given that it is taking place here at the White House, on the White House complex, where those security protocols are very clear. But there is a an indication here, Tom, that they're going to look at potentially other events, other fundraisers. From time to time, the president will most likely go to his own properties. When we're talking about different hotels and the way that law enforcement approaches security, it would be pretty typical for the president to go to one of his own properties where they don't necessarily lock down the entire hotel either, just like was the case for the Washington Hilton. So they may need to take a look at all of that, make some larger decisions. And from the White House today, they did imply that the president would prefer to do some of these larger scale events at the White House in his $400 million project of the ballroom, which is currently facing legal hurdles. But we should point out, Tom, that something like the White House Correspondents' Dinner would never be held here at the White House. It's a private event hosted by the White House Correspondents Association and not something that would take place on this campus specifically.
All right, Monica Alba for us. Monica, thank you. I want to bring back Tom Winter. Tom, I think we're getting our first sketches in court of the suspect who's been charged now in an attempt to kill the president. Here he is. Again, he did not enter a plea. We learned he's 31 years old. Cole Tomas Allen, a tutor. And it's interesting because it sounds like from the manifesto this was he mentioned some of the students that he had to lie to about why he was going to be absent. We know he has a master's degree. He lived in Torrance, California. And the manifesto, from what we understand, Tom, was sent to loved ones, including his relatives.
That's right, Tom. And those relatives did pick up the phone and call police, contacted local law enforcement agencies, one in Connecticut, but they only had about 10 minutes. And as you can imagine, by the time they vet that call, figure out what is really going on, assess the priority nature, which I don't even know if it was that clear specifically what would be targeted or as far as how serious the imminent threat was. It was obviously clear from the note who would be targeted. That they would then have to reach out and get that communication to D.C. Probably just wasn't enough time, based on my experience in talking with law enforcement agencies in the past. Speaking of law enforcement agencies, Monica touched on it. You and I have talked about it. The threats against this president in particular, awfully high. We've seen that. He's obviously a polarizing figure for some in this country, and so that's something that needs to be looked at. Monica also mentioned the America 250. We have that. We have the FIFA World Cup coming this summer, as you know. There are some serious security challenges going forward, even outside of the political realm. We look at the war in the Middle East. That's obviously a major concern as well. The concern right in front of our faces, quite literally, is obviously this case. We'll hear more in the detention memo, as Danny mentioned. Should get some more details about this person, what they find on those phones, and we'll see if what the next sketches hold when Cole is back in court in several days' time.
Tom, as we were analyzing the timeline, you know, we put there on the screen when the president announced that he was going to attend the White House Correspondents' Dinner. It was public information where this was being held. The suspect in this case allegedly books a hotel room, according to the criminal complaint we have, where this dinner was being held. And people might be asking, how could this guy get into a hotel where the president was going to be with all these weapons? And you simply, you can't sort of frisk and check every single hotel guest that's coming in and coming out, you know, during a week's time, if you will. It's almost impossible. That's why you set up these security perimeters outside the event.
Well, that's 100% right, Tom. And, you know, this was something that was looked at after the mass shooting in Las Vegas at the country music concert when Stephen Paddock set up in a hotel room overlooking the concert as a shooter's nest. And he had actually kept